Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the stories. My name is Joseph Mackenzie, though everyone calls me Joe. I've been a park ranger at Denali National Park for the past 3 years. Before that, I was a bush pilot. I don't fly anymore. Not since the accident. The cold bites at my face as I drive my snowmobile across the endless white landscape. Mount McKinley stands tall against the sky, its peak hidden in a blanket of clouds. My breath turns to ice in the air. It's minus 40 degrees out here, but I barely notice it anymore. All around me, the tundra stretches as far as the eye can see. Here and there, clusters of small spruce trees break up the whiteness. They look like little islands in a frozen sea. Above me, the northern lights dance in the sky. Green and purple waves ripple across the darkness. It's beautiful, but I don't have time to enjoy the view. I have a job to do. The engine of my snowmobile rumbles beneath me. The sound bounces off the empty landscape, a steady heartbeat in this silent world. I try my radio again. Base, this is Ranger Mackenzie. Do you copy? Nothing but static comes. Back. The weather up here messes with the signals. I'm on my own. A snowy owl swoops overhead, its wings barely making a sound. It's hunting for food, foxes maybe, or lemmings. Nature carries on, no matter how cold it gets. The air smells like snow and pine trees, but there's something else. A hint of wood smoke from somewhere far away. Strange. There shouldn't be anyone else out here. I slow down to check the ground. Caribou tracks cross back and forth in the snow. They've been following the same paths for thousands of years. I know these trails almost as well as they do. As I get closer to the glacier, something feels off. It's warmer here. Ice is melting. Even though it's December in Alaska, that's not right. I touch the compass in my pocket. It's dented and scratched, but it still works. I saved it from the plane crash. The one that killed Mike. Mike and I were best friends since high school. We became pilots together, flew together for 10 years. Then, 3 years ago, our engine failed over a remote valley. I managed to crash land, but Mike didn't make it. I walked away without a scratch. Sometimes I wish I hadn't. I still carry a small photo of us in my wallet. It was taken right before our last flight. We're standing in front of the plane, smiling. Neither of us knew what was coming. After the crash, I couldn't get back in a cockpit. The nightmares were too much. Mike's screams as the plane went down haunted me every night. So I became a ranger instead, feet firmly on the ground. People say I'm good at my job. Methodical, they call it. I've found dozens of lost hikers and stranded travelers over the years. I know how to track, how to navigate, how to survive out. Here, my pilot training helps with that. Today's mission is serious. A research team of 4 scientists hasn't checked in for 3 days. That's 3 missed radio calls. Protocol says we wait for 2, then we go looking. I glance at the sky. Dark clouds are gathering. A storm is coming, a big one. Once it hits, no planes or helicopters will be able to fly for weeks. If I don't find these scientists soon, they might not make it. The research camp should be just over the next ridge. I speed up, hoping I'm not too late. I reach the top of the ridge and stop my snowmobile. Below me is the small lake where the research team set up their camp. I can see their tent and equipment, but something doesn't feel right. My stomach tightens as I slowly drive down toward the camp. The first thing I notice is that their boats are gone. They had 2 small rubber boats for taking water samples from the lake. Where did they go? As I get closer, more things start to seem wrong. All their stuff is arranged in perfect circles. Sleeping bags, food containers, research equipment, all laid out in rings. No one would set things up like that. It's too perfect. I turn off my engine and listen. Nothing. No birds, no wind, no animal sounds. The silence wraps around me, like a heavy blanket. "Hello," I call out. "Anyone here? This is Ranger Mackenzie." My voice echoes across the lake. but no one answers. I walk closer to their tent and notice strange marks carved into the ice. They look like symbols, but none that I recognize. They form a circle around the entire camp. Inside the tent I find their food, cans, packages, energy bars, all untouched. If they left on their own, why would they leave all their food behind? It's been days since they were last heard from. They would have needed to eat. I step back outside and look around carefully. There are no animal tracks anywhere. No moose, no foxes, not even a rabbit. In Alaska, you always see animal tracks. Always. But not here. It's like every living thing is avoiding this place. Then I smell it. A sweet, sickly smell coming from holes in the ice near the shore. It reminds me of flowers rotting in a vase. After too many days. I've never smelled anything like it in the wilderness before. I try my radio again. Base, this is Mackenzie at the research site. Do you copy? Instead of static, a strange melody comes through the speaker. It sounds almost like singing, but not quite. The hair on my arms stands up. I turn it off quickly and walk over to the researchers' work table. Their notebooks are still here. I flip through the pages, looking for clues. The last entry makes my blood run cold. Day 14, we've seen impossible things under the ice. Creatures that shouldn't exist. They watch us. They mimic us. Reynolds thinks they're trying to communicate, but Davis is convinced they want something else. The shapes they take, it's not natural. Tomorrow, we're going to try. The entry stops there. No explanation of what they were going to try. No hint of where they went. I close the notebook and notice something I missed before. Wet footprints on the shore. They lead from the water's edge up onto the land, but they don't look human. They're not from any animal I know either. Too big for an otter, too small for a bear, and shaped all wrong. The footprints stop suddenly, as if whatever made them just vanished into thin air. As I stand there trying to make sense of it all, I hear something that makes my heart skip a beat. Laughter. Children's laughter coming from across the frozen lake. I spin around, scanning the white landscape. There are no children out here. The nearest town is over 100 miles away. No one would bring kids to this remote area, especially not in December. The laughter comes again, bouncing off the ice. It sounds playful, innocent, but there's something not quite right about it. It's too perfect, like someone trying to sound like children rather than actual kids. Hello, I call out again. Is anyone there? The laughter stops. The silence returns, heavier than before. The temperature seems to drop suddenly. I zip my jacket higher and reach for my flashlight. The sun is starting to set, and darkness comes fast in Alaska winters. I need to decide what to do. The storm is coming. I could head back now and return with a larger search team after the weather clears. But that could be weeks from now. If the research team is in trouble, they might not have weeks. Just as I turn to head back to my snowmobile, I notice movement on the lake. Something dark sliding under the ice, moving fast. Then another shape joins it, and another. They're swimming beneath the frozen surface, circling the area where I stand. I back away slowly, my eyes fixed on the ice. Whatever is down there, it's not fish. It's too big, too purposeful in its movements. Then, with a crack that sounds like a gunshot, the ice begins to break. I jump back as the ice cracks. My heart pounds in my chest. The sound echoes across the lake like a warning. Water bubbles up through the broken ice. I expect to see fish maybe, or some kind of Arctic seal. What rises from the hole is neither. Sleek, dark shapes emerge from the water. At first they look like otters, big ones, with glossy fur that sheds water, in droplets. But then they stand up on two legs. I rub my eyes, sure I'm seeing things, but they're still there. Otter-like creatures, standing upright like people. Their eyes catch the fading light, reflecting it back like tiny mirrors. One of them makes a sound, a singing sort of noise that reminds me of whales. It feels sad and happy all at once. And for a moment, I want to cry without knowing why. What are you? I whisper. As if in answer, the creature's body begins to change. Its shape blurs, like looking through water, and then it's not an otter anymore. It's a person, a perfect copy of one of the missing researchers. I recognize him from the photos I was given. Davis, the team leader. But it's not really Davis. The eyes are wrong. Too dark, too shiny. And when it opens its mouth to speak, its teeth are pointed like an otter's. "Joe Mackenzie," it says in Davis's voice, "we've been waiting for you." More of them rise from the hole in the ice. Some stay in their otter form. Others shift to look like the other missing researchers. One even takes the shape of a child, the source of the laughter I heard. I back away slowly. "Where are the real researchers? What have you done with them?" The Davis thing tilts its head. "They're here. They're with us now." It walks toward me across the ice. I expect to hear footsteps, but it moves silently. Then it does something impossible. It walks straight through a snowbank like it's not even there. My mind struggles to make sense of what I'm seeing. These creatures can move through solid things as if they're walking through water. "What are you?" I ask again. "The Tlingit people call us Kushtaka," says the Davis thing. Others have different names. I've heard stories about the Kushtaka, shape-shifting otter spirits from native Alaskan legends. But legends aren't supposed to be real. Another one appears beside me suddenly, though I didn't see it move. It's so close I can feel the cold coming off its body. My arm goes numb where it almost touches me. "You carry a heavy weight, Joe Mackenzie," it says in a voice that sounds like the wind. "The guilt of survival." More of them emerge from the ice now. Not just from the hole, but straight through the solid surface. They pop up like bubbles in boiling water, all around me. Some sing their strange songs, and I feel my thoughts getting fuzzy, like I'm falling asleep with my eyes open. I shake my head hard to clear it. "Stop that." The singing quiets, but doesn't end completely. One of the Kushtaka forms a ball of ice in its hands, shaping it without tools until it looks like a perfect model of my crashed plane. The sight of it makes my chest tighten. "How do you know about that?" I demand. "We know what burdens souls," says the Davis thing. "We collect such burdens." I notice now that the ice beneath my feet has changed. It's clear, like glass, and I can see down into the water below. There are shapes under there, human shapes, floating in the darkness, not swimming, just hanging there, eyes open, mouths frozen in silent screams. With a jolt, I recognize the research team, the real one. Their bodies float under the ice like exhibits in a museum, and with them, dozens of others, old, young, from different times, judging by their clothes. "You've been taking people," I say. It's not a question. The Kushtaka nearest me nods. "We keep them safe. We keep their souls." It reaches for me, but I step back quickly. Where its hand touches the sleeve of my jacket, frost forms instantly. The fabric becomes brittle and cracks. I turn to run, but they're everywhere now. They appear and disappear around me, moving through dimensions I can't see. The ice shifts under my feet, forming walls and barriers that weren't there before. One touches the snow, and it rises up to form a spear of ice. Another waves its hand, and the path behind me closes off with a wall of snow. They're playing with me, testing me. I pull out my flashlight and shine it at the nearest one. It hisses and backs away, sensitive to the light. I sweep the beam around in a circle, creating a temporary safe zone. But I know the batteries won't last forever. And the sun is almost gone now. The wind picks up, carrying their singing voices around me in a ghostly chorus. The sound makes me want to lie down in the snow and sleep. It would be so easy to give in. I pinch my arm hard, using pain to stay alert. I need to think. I need to find a way out of this. The Davis thing stands just outside my circle of light. "You don't have to fight us, Joe Mackenzie. We can help you. We can take away your pain." Its face shifts again, and suddenly I'm looking at Mike. My co-pilot, my friend, the one who died while I lived. Joe, it says in Mike's voice. I've been waiting for you. My throat tightens at the sight of Mike standing there. I know it's not really him. It can't be. But he looks so real. The same messy brown hair, the same crooked smile, even the small scar above his right eyebrow from when we crashed our bikes as kids. You're not Mike, I say, but my voice shakes. I can be, the thing says. Down below, under the ice, we can be together again. No more nightmares, Joe, no more guilt. The other Kushtaka move closer, their singing growing louder. The sound wraps around my mind like fog. You survived when others didn't, says the Mike thing. That's why we called to you. That's why you're here. And suddenly I understand. These creatures feed on guilt. They're drawn to it like sharks. To blood. The research team must have had their own burdens, their own regrets. And now the Kushtaka want me too. The others, I say, nodding toward the ice. The research team. Are they still alive? The Mike thing smiles. In a way, their souls are with us. They'll never age, never suffer, never die. But they're not. Free. Is anyone truly free, Joe? You've been trapped by your guilt for 3 years. It reaches out a hand to me. I've missed you. Come join me. Part of me wants to take that hand, to believe it's really Mike, to let go of everything and sink beneath the ice where maybe, just maybe, I could find peace. The ice beneath my feet becomes clear again. I can see down into their underwater world. The researchers float there, but now they're moving, reaching up toward me. Their faces look peaceful now, not scared. Mike is there too, the real Mike, not this copy, beckoning to me. Just one step, the Mike thing whispers. That's all it takes. My flashlight flickers. The batteries are dying. Soon I'll be in darkness with these creatures. I close my eyes and think, what would a pilot do in this situation? How would I navigate if I were flying blind? Navigation, maps, reflections. My eyes snap open. You can move between dimensions, I say to the Mike thing. That's how you appear and disappear. It nods, pleased that I understand. But you need to see where you're going, don't you? You navigate by sight. The smile fades from its face. I reach into my pocket and pull out Mike's compass. The glass surface catches the last bit of light from my flashlight, reflecting it. The Kushtaka nearest me flinches away from the reflection. That's it. That's their weakness. I remember the plane crash site. Parts of the wreckage are still, scattered across that remote valley, including pieces of the shattered windshield. I want to see him, I say, nodding down at the ice. The real Mike, not your copy. The Mike thing smiles again, thinking it's won. Follow me. It leads me across the ice to a larger crack forming in the surface. The other Kushtaka follow behind, their bodies making no sound as they move. We reach a massive ice floe floating on the deepest part of the lake. Below us, I can see nothing but darkness. He's down there, says the Mike thing, waiting for you. I need a moment, I say, to say goodbye to this world. It nods, patient now that it believes I'll join them. I turn away, pretending to look at the stars coming out. What I'm really doing is pulling out everything reflective I have. My compass, my metal water bottle, the foil from an energy bar in my pocket, the small mirror from my survival kit. I arrange them in a circle around me, using the snow to prop them up. I'm ready, I say. The Kushtaka gather close. The ice beneath us begins to crack. Just as the surface starts to give way, I pull out my flashlight. With the last bit of battery power, I turn it on and aim it at my makeshift mirrors. Light bounces everywhere, creating a web of reflections. The Kushtaka scream, a terrible sound between an otter's cry and a human wail. They try to phase, away to escape to their other dimension. But the reflections confuse them. They can't see where they're going. Some vanish into the ice only to reappear moments later, disoriented. Others crash into each other, their forms blurring and mixing. In horrible ways, the mic thing reaches for me, its face twisted in anger. "You can't leave. Your guilt will bring you back to us." I back away across the ice. "Maybe, but not today." With a final desperate lunge, it grabs for my ankle. I jump back, but the ice is slippery. I fall hard, sliding toward the crack forming, in the center of the flow. For a moment, I'm sure I'm going in, that despite everything, they'll get me anyway. Then my hand catches on something solid, a jutting piece of ice. I hold tight as the flow breaks apart. The Kushtaka are still caught in my reflection trap, unable to escape. As the ice splits, they fall into the water, their forms twisting between human and otter shapes. The mic thing is the last to go. It looks at me with Mike's eyes one final time. "You'll be back," it says. Then it's gone, pulled under by the dark water. I lie there on my piece of ice, breathing hard. The lake settles. The northern lights dance overhead, as if nothing happened. I make my way back to shore, careful on the broken ice. At the research camp, I gather what evidence I can. Their notebooks, photos of the strange symbols. No one will believe me without proof. As I pack up my snowmobile, I look back at the lake. Under that ice are the souls of the research team. And maybe, just maybe, Mike is down there too. I couldn't save them today, but I survived. I got away. That night, as I make camp far from the lake, I pull out the photo of Mike and me. For the first time in 3 years, I don't feel the sharp stab of guilt when I look at his face. "I'll come back for you," I whisper to the photo. "I promise." That was 5 years ago. Every winter since then, I've returned to that lake. Each time, I bring more mirrors, more lights, trying to find a way to free the trapped souls below. The other rangers think I'm crazy. They say I'm obsessed with a rescue mission that makes no sense. The official report says the research team was lost in a storm. Only I know the truth. Tonight, I'm heading out again. A blizzard is coming, the worst one in decades, they say. But I can't wait. I found something in an old Tlingit legend that might help me break the Kushtaka's hold on their prisoners. If I don't make it back this time, and someone finds. This journal know that I wasn't crazy. The Wailing Peaks hold secrets beneath their ice, souls trapped by creatures that should only exist in nightmares. And if you hear children laughing across a frozen lake, or see otters standing like men in the moonlight, run, run, and don't look back. This is Joe Mackenzie signing off. I'm going to bring them home, or join them trying. My name is Frank Kowalski, and I've seen things in these mountains that no one would believe. But I need to tell this story. I need someone to know what happened at Logan Pass last October. That morning started like any other patrol. Dawn was just breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air was crisp and cold, the kind that bites at your lungs when you breathe too deeply. Winter was coming early to Glacier National Park. As I hiked up the trail, the sound of my boots crunching through the frost-covered ground echoed through the valley. Each step made a satisfying crunch that bounced between the mountains. The pines around me stood tall and ancient, their branches heavy with fresh snow from last night's storm. I stopped for a moment, just to breathe it all in. The mountain air carried the sharp scent of pine needles, mixed with the clean smell of approaching winter. You never get tired of that smell. It reminds you that you're alive. Looking up, I spotted a golden eagle circling overhead. Its cry cut through the silence like a knife, reminding me how small I was in this vast wilderness. I watched it for a while, envying its freedom. Below me, the Going to the Sun road stretched empty and abandoned. They'd closed it for winter maintenance weeks ago. In summer, it would be crawling with tourists in rental cars. Now, it was just another empty path through the wilderness. My walkie-talkie crackled with static, making me jump. I tried to radio, back to headquarters, but all I got was more static. It wasn't unusual up here, but it still made me uneasy. If anything went wrong, the nearest backup was at least 50 miles away. I was on my own. Movement caught my eye. A mountain goat watching me curiously from a rocky outcrop. Its white coat stood out against the dark stone. We stared at each other for a few seconds before it bounded away, disappearing into the landscape like a ghost. As I continued walking, I noticed mist beginning to rise from Hidden Lake. It swirled and danced in the morning light, creating shapes that seemed almost human before dissolving back into nothing. Beautiful, but somehow unsettling. I touched the .357 revolver at my hip, taking comfort in its familiar weight. After Vietnam, I swore I'd never carry a gun again. Funny how quickly that changed once I started working these remote trails. Out. Here, a gun might be the only thing standing between you and a hungry grizzly, or worse. That's when I noticed something strange. The forest had gone completely still. No birds singing, no small animals rustling in the underbrush. Even the wind had stopped whispering through the trees. In 20 years of working these mountains, I'd never heard such perfect silence. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. Most people notice the scar first. It runs from my right, temple down to my jaw, a jagged reminder of a day in Da Nang when shrapnel rained from the sky. I usually tell tourists it was from a bear. Easier that way. After losing 3 patients in a field hospital bombing, I couldn't stay in Vietnam anymore. The army sent me home with a medal I never look at and nightmares I can't escape. So I came. Here to Glacier National Park. I figured the mountains might be big enough to hide in. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out a cigarette and lit it. I never smoked before the war. Now I can't seem to stop. The familiar ritual calms me, gives me something to focus on besides the memories. While catching my breath, I pulled out my wallet and looked at the photo I keep there. Rebecca. Her smile still made my heart ache, even after all these years. Car accident. 3 months before our wedding. Sometimes I think she was the lucky one, not having to see what I became after. Vietnam. Just you and me today, Becca, I whispered, tucking the photo away. The mountains don't answer back, and that's just how I like it. No people means no one to save, no one to fail. I patted my breast pocket, making sure my compass was still there. It's an old army issue thing. Nothing special to look at, but it's gotten me out of more tight spots than I can count. Some guys had lucky coins or rabbit's feet. I had my compass. 20 years in these mountains taught me to read them like a book. I know when a storm is coming by how the air feels on my skin. I can spot animal tracks from 50 yards away. Out here, experience keeps you alive. But all that experience couldn't fix what the war broke inside me. The nightmares still come, 3 or 4 nights a week. I wake up sweating, thinking I'm back in that field hospital, trying to stop the bleeding with my bare hands while mortars fall outside. Today's mission was supposed to be straightforward. 3 hikers from the Blackfeet Reservation went missing 2 days ago. Young guys, experienced outdoorsmen who knew these mountains almost as well as I did. Their families were worried sick. But as I hiked deeper into the wilderness, something felt different about this search. The silence was too complete, the air too still. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. In Vietnam, we called it the 1,000-yard stare. That feeling when you know something bad is about to happen, but can't see it yet. I had that feeling now, like I was being watched by something hidden just beyond my vision. My instincts were screaming at me to turn around, to radio for backup, to get the hell out of these mountains. But I kept walking. Those 3 young men needed help, and I was the only one looking. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't hunting. I was being hunted. I found their campsite just after noon, nestled in a small clearing near the edge of Hidden Lake. Everything looked wrong from the first moment I saw it. The tent was still standing, zipped up tight against the cold. Their backpacks were lined up neatly by the fire pit. A small cooking pot sat on a portable stove, half-cooked eggs frozen solid inside. It looked like they'd been in the middle of making breakfast when something made them leave, or took them. But there were no signs of a struggle. No blood, no torn clothing, no evidence of a bear or mountain lion attack. It was as if they'd simply vanished into thin air in the middle of cooking breakfast. I circled the campsite slowly, looking for tracks. That's when I saw them. Strange footprints in the soft earth around the camp. They were roughly human-shaped, but wrong somehow. The toes were too long, and what looked like webbing connected them, like a cross between a human foot and a frog's. I knelt down to examine one of the prints more closely. Whatever made it was heavy. The impression was deep in the mud. And big, at least size 14, maybe larger. Standing up, I realized how quiet it was. No birds singing, no insects buzzing, not even the sound of wind through the trees. It was the kind of silence that has weight to it, that presses down on your ears until they hurt. A strange smell drifted from the nearby stream, like rotting fish mixed with something metallic. I'd spent enough time around dead things in Vietnam to recognize the smell of decay, but this was different, wrong. I pulled out my radio, trying again to call for backup. Nothing but static came through the speaker, not even the occasional crackle of the dispatcher's voice, just a steady hiss, like the sound of water running over stones. Looking around the campsite more carefully, I noticed claw marks on the trees surrounding the clearing. Not bear claw marks. I'd seen plenty of those. These were longer, thinner, and reached nearly 15 feet up the trunks. No animal I knew could reach that high. A glint of light caught my eye. Following it, I found a trail of what looked like human hair leading from the campsite toward the water's edge. Dark hair, like that of the missing hikers. I followed it slowly, hand resting on my revolver. The temperature seemed to drop with each step I took. My breath formed thick clouds in front of my face, and a bone-deep chill set in that had nothing to do with the October air. According to my thermometer, it had dropped 20 degrees in the last few minutes. That wasn't natural. Nothing about this was natural. I was halfway to the lake when I heard it, the snap of branches breaking behind me. Then another, and another. The sounds came in a rhythm, like footsteps, heavy footsteps, moving with purpose. Something was following me. I turned slowly, drawing my revolver. The forest behind me was empty, but the sounds continued, branches snapping in a steady rhythm, moving in a circle around me. Whatever it was big, and it was toying with me. My training kicked in. I backed toward a large pine tree, putting something solid behind me. Eyes scanning the forest, finger on the trigger, ready for whatever might come at me, but I wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready for what happened next? Frank. A woman's voice called my name from across the frozen lake. Soft and familiar. Impossible. Frank, please help me. Rebecca's voice. My Rebecca, who had been dead for 8 years. I stood frozen, unable to move or think clearly. The voice was perfect. The slight southern accent, the way she always said my name like it was something precious. This isn't real, I whispered to myself. She's not here. But when the voice called again, I couldn't help looking across the lake. The surface was empty, just ice and snow stretching to the far shore. No one was there. Nothing could be there. Yet as I watched, ripples spread across the ice-covered water, like something large was moving underneath it, something that should not exist. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every instinct told me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The ice at the center of the lake began to crack. Water bubbled up. Through the opening, dark and unnaturally still. Then a shape rose from the water, human-like but wrong. It stood upright on the ice, water cascading from its body. At first I thought it was a man. Then its face shifted, and I was looking at Miguel Blackwolf, one of the missing hikers. Before I could process what I was seeing, the face changed again. Now it was Thomas running bare. Then James Littlefeather. The faces of all three missing hikers, one after another, like a deck of cards being shuffled. Its eyes glowed pale blue, like the heart of a glacier. Cold, ancient, hungry. When it opened its mouth, all three voices came out at once, overlapping each other. "Help us, Ranger! We're so cold. Don't leave us here." I raised my gun with shaking hands. "What are you? Where are they?" The thing tilted its head like a confused dog. Then it smiled with too many teeth. "They're here," it said, still using their voices. "They're me now, and soon you will be too." It moved. One moment it was in the middle of the lake. The next, it stood 10 feet away from me. I didn't see it cross the distance. It was just suddenly there, like a jump cut in a movie. I fired my revolver. The bullet went straight through its chest, but the creature didn't bleed. Instead, its body rippled like water, the hole closing instantly. It reached for me with long, pale fingers. I stumbled backward, but wasn't fast. Enough! Its hand brushed my arm. The pain was immediate and intense, like being burned with dry ice. I yelled and pulled away, looking down to see a handprint of frostbite already forming on my skin through my jacket sleeve. "What the hell are you?" I gasped, backing away. "I am the one who hunts those who hunt," it said, its voice now a strange blend of the hikers and Rebecca. "I am the shadow under the ice, the voice in the storm, the hunger that never ends." The thing, the Kushtaka, I would later learn it was called, began to change again. Its body seemed to flicker, becoming transparent then solid again, like it was phasing in and out of reality. "You know us, Frank Kowalski," it said. "You've seen us before, in the eyes of dying men in Da Nang, in the darkness between stars, in the last breath of those you couldn't save." I kept backing away, my mind racing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. Yet the pain in my arm was real enough. The creature moved again, impossibly fast. This time appearing directly beside me, its cold breath on my neck. "Your guilt tastes so sweet," it whispered in Rebecca's voice. "Your fear fills me. Your memories call to me across worlds." I ran. For the first time since Vietnam, I turned and ran from an enemy. But as I crashed through the underbrush, I knew it wasn't following me. It didn't need to. It was playing with me, hunting me. And in these mountains, there was nowhere to hide. I ran until my lungs burned, stumbling through the forest without direction. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, leaning against a pine tree, I realized what was happening. The creature wasn't just mimicking voices. It was pulling thoughts from my mind, using my memories against me. It fed on guilt, on trauma, on the darkest parts of a person's past, and I had plenty to feed it. As if reading my thoughts, the air around me filled with new voices, not Rebecca's this time, but others I recognized instantly. "Why didn't you save me, Doc?" A young soldier from Kesan, his stomach torn open by shrapnel. "You promised I'd make it home." Another voice, belonging to a Marine who died on my operating table. "You left us to die." A woman from a village near Da Nang, where I'd been too late to help after an attack. Their faces appeared in the air around me, ghosts made of mist and memory. Each one a failure, each one a weight I'd carried for years. The creature was trying to paralyze me with guilt, to make me give up. That's when I understood something important. It was hunting me, but it was also afraid of me. Otherwise, why play these games? Why not just kill me outright? I needed shelter, somewhere to think, to plan. I spotted a narrow opening in the rocky hillside ahead, a small ice cave formed by spring runoff. Not ideal, but it would have to do. Inside, the cave was tight and cold, barely tall enough for me to stand. Ice crystals covered the walls, catching what little light filtered in from outside. I moved deeper into the cave, using my military training to set up a defensive position. I checked my weapon, 3 bullets left. Not much, but maybe enough if I could figure out how to hurt this thing. My compass began spinning wildly in my pocket. When I pulled it out, the needle whirled in all directions, never settling. The creature was disrupting the magnetic field somehow. It was close. The temperature in the cave plummeted. My breath came out in thick white clouds, and the walls seemed to darken as something blocked the entrance. It came in like liquid shadow, filling the cave with its presence. Its form expanded, stretching along the walls and ceiling until I was surrounded by it. The faces of the missing hikers looked down at me from every angle, their expressions twisted in pain. "You can't save them," it said with a dozen voices at once, "just like you couldn't save the others." The cave around me began to change. The ice walls melted away, replaced by the canvas walls of a field hospital. The smell of blood and antiseptic filled my nose. Screams echoed from every direction. I was back in Vietnam, reliving my worst day, the day the hospital was hit. The day I lost 3 patients while trying to operate during a bombing. I saw their faces, clearer than I had in years, felt their blood on my hands, heard their last words. "It's not real," I told myself, squeezing my eyes shut. "It's using my memories." But it felt real, so real I could taste the dust in the air, feel the heat of the jungle, hear the thump of mortars landing nearby. My hand found my wallet. I pulled out Rebecca's photo, focusing on her face. On something good, something the creature couldn't twist. "You're not real," I said louder, opening my eyes to face the thing. "You're just a predator, and predators can be killed." The illusion faltered. The field hospital flickered, ice walls briefly visible behind it. I was on to something. The creature fed on negative emotions, guilt, fear, trauma, but positive memories seemed to weaken it. It screamed in frustration, the sound so high-pitched it made my ears ring. The cave shook, ice cracking around us. I had to move, had to get to open ground where I might have a chance. I lunged forward, pushing through the creature's semi-solid form. It felt like running through freezing water, the cold burning my skin. But I made it past, stumbling out of the cave into the fading daylight. I found myself on a frozen section of the lake, the ice creaking under my feet. 100-foot drop, weighted below if the ice gave way. Not good. The creature followed, its form more solid now, angry. It no longer tried to look human, its body elongated, limbs too long, face a twisted mockery of the hikers it had taken. "You cannot escape," it hissed, moving toward me across the ice. "Your guilt belongs to me. Your fear belongs to me. You belong to me." The sun was setting behind the mountains, the last rays stretching across the ice. As the light hit my compass, still in my hand, it reflected in a bright flash. The creature recoiled from the reflected sunlight, just for a moment, but I saw it. Light. It feared direct light. I had an idea, a desperate one, but the only chance I had. I held up my compass, angling it to catch the last sunlight and reflect it toward the creature. Where the beam hit its body, the shifting form solidified, becoming more physical. "Come on then," I called to it. "Come and get me." It rushed forward, now fully solid, its clawed hands reaching for me. I waited until the last possible second, then ducked and drove my survival knife upward into its chest. This time, it didn't pass through. This time, the blade stuck. The creature let out an inhuman shriek. Its body began to crack like ice, blue light spilling from the wounds. But I'd made a mistake. In solidifying it with the light, I'd made it heavier, much heavier. The ice beneath us groaned, then shattered. We fell together, the creature still impaled on my knife, into the freezing water below. The cold hit me like 1,000 knives, driving the air from my lungs. As we sank, the creature began to dissolve, breaking apart into the black water. Its faces, the hikers, Rebecca, the patients I'd lost, all looked at me one last time before fading away. My lungs screamed for air. The surface seemed miles away, a faint light above the dark water. I knew I wouldn't make it. The cold was too intense, my limbs already growing numb. As consciousness began to fade, I felt strangely at peace. I'd stopped. The thing, whatever it was, it wouldn't hurt anyone else. My last thought was of Rebecca, of her smile in the summer sun. Then darkness took me. My name is Carl Brennan, and I've spent the last 3 years hiding in one of the most beautiful places on Earth. This morning started like any other day in Yellowstone, but something in the air felt different. The steam from the geysers drifted up in the distance as I drove my patrol truck through the remote Shoshone geyser basin. Most tourists never make it this far into the park. That's partly why I chose this route. Peace and quiet suit me just fine. The smell hit me as soon as I stepped out of the truck. That mix of rotten eggs from the sulfur springs and the sweet scent of pine trees and wildflowers. It's a weird combination, but I've grown to like it. Means I'm far away from city smells, from Chicago, from my old life. I paused to watch a small herd of bison grazing in the meadow nearby. Massive animals, really. Their dark shapes stood out against the bright morning sky. One of them, a big bull, looked up at me for a moment before returning to his breakfast. At least they don't ask questions. All around me the hot springs bubbled and hissed. Some people find the noise creepy, but to me, it's just the sound of Yellowstone breathing. The Firehole River ran clear as glass beside the trail, reflecting the blue sky above. Not a cloud to be seen today. My radio crackled with static, then dispatcher's voice came through. Ranger Brennan, check in. Over. Brennan here. All clear in Shoshone Basin. Over. Copy that. Remember to check on that overdue camping permit at Site 27. Will do. Over and out. I clipped the radio back to my belt and watched a red-tailed hawk circle above, hunting for its next meal. Smart bird. Knows exactly what it wants and how to get it. I felt the weight of my .44 Magnum against my hip. Not standard issue for park rangers, but my boss made an exception for me. Old habits die hard, and after 15 years as a detective, I don't feel right without it. Out here, with grizzlies and the occasional lost hunter, I've got good reasons to keep it close. I looked around at the empty trails. This far into the backcountry, you rarely see anyone. The nearest road is 12 miles back, and most folks aren't willing to hike that far. Fine by me. The fewer people, the better. The sun was high in the sky now, but I couldn't shake this chill that kept running up my spine. The temperature felt wrong for August. Too cold. I zipped up my ranger jacket and pulled my hat down lower. Something wasn't right today. I've been a ranger long enough to know when the park feels off. And today, something was definitely off. I stroked my gray-streaked beard as I checked my map. This beard hides more than just my face. It covers the scars from that nasty bar fight back in Chicago. That night changed everything. See, I wasn't always Ranger Brennan. 3 years ago, I was Detective Brennan with the Chicago PD. 15 years on the force, and I was good at my job. Too good, maybe. When the Moretti family tried to buy me off to look the other way on a murder case, I said no. Big mistake. In a city where money talks and honest cops walk, right into trouble. I pulled out the worn photo I keep on my dashboard. My twin daughters, Emma and Lily, smiled back at me. They were 7 in this picture, the last one I have of them. My ex-wife Linda made sure of that. The custody battle was ugly, especially after she found out about the death threats from Moretti's men. Dangerous lifestyle, her lawyer called it. The judge agreed. I tucked the photo away and started the truck. Yellowstone was my fresh start. 3,000 miles from Chicago, from the mob, from the lawyers. Out here, nobody cares about your past. They only care if you can keep idiot tourists from falling into geysers or feeding the bears. The silver St. Michael pendant around my neck caught the sunlight, patron saint of police officers. My dad gave it to me when I joined the force. Funny how I still wear it, even though I'm not a cop anymore. Old habits, I guess. My boss says I'm too careful, too methodical. Last month I stopped a family from hiking a trail because I noticed fresh bear prints. They complained, but the next day, rangers spotted a mama grizzly with cubs right where they wanted to go. My detective instincts saved lives that day. I glanced at my notepad. Today's job was simple. Check on the Miller family at campsite 27. Their permit was 3 days overdue. Probably just forgot to renew it. Happens all the time with first-time campers. But as I drove deeper into the backcountry, that cold feeling in my gut got worse. Something was wrong, really wrong. In my detective days, I learned to trust that feeling. It saved my life more than once. I parked the truck at the trailhead and grabbed my pack. Campsite 27 was a 2-mile hike from here. As I walked, I kept my hand close to my gun. That feeling, that cop instinct telling me something bad was waiting up ahead, it wouldn't go away. In Chicago, that feeling usually meant an ambush or a trap. Out here, I didn't know what it meant, but I was about to find out. The Miller families. Campsite looked normal at first glance. Tent was still up. Camping stove sat on the picnic table. Cooler was closed tight to keep bears away. But then I noticed their car keys hanging in the ignition of their SUV. Nobody leaves their keys in. The car out here. That was the first red flag. I moved closer, my hand resting on my gun. The picnic table told another story. Half-eaten sandwiches, open bags of chips, cups of juice tipped over, like they all jumped up and left in the middle of lunch. "Hello? Park Ranger, anyone here?" My voice echoed back to me. No answer. I circled the campsite slowly, looking at the ground. My old detective habits kicked in. 4 sets of footprints led away from the camp. 2 adult-sized, 2 kid-sized. The Miller family, mom, dad, and their 2 boys. But something was off about the tracks coming back. I counted 5 sets returning to camp. 5, not 4. And that extra set, it matched Mr. Miller's prints exactly. Same size, same shoe pattern, same depth. That's impossible. No 2 people leave identical footprints. Even twins have differences. I looked up from the tracks and realized how quiet it was. Too quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, no insects buzzing. In all my years at Yellowstone, I'd never heard such silence. It was like all the wildlife had run away. Then I smelled it. A sickly sweet smell like fruit that's been sitting in the sun too long. It wasn't coming from the campsite. It seemed to be everywhere, hanging in the air. I pulled out my radio. "Dispatch, this is Brennan at campsite 27. Possible missing persons situation. The Miller family isn't here, but their vehicle and belongings are. Request backup, over." Nothing but static came back at me. I tried again. Still just static. I was only 12 miles from the ranger station. The radio should work fine. I put the radio away and walked to the edge of the campsite. That's when I saw the trees. 3 pines with fresh scratches on their trunks. Not bear scratches. These were deliberate. They formed symbols. Words, maybe, in some language I'd never seen before. My heart beat faster. In my years as a detective, I'd seen some strange things, but nothing like this. A bark caught my attention. I turned and saw the Miller's golden retriever lying under a bush near their tent. Relief washed over me. At least someone was still here. "Hey, boy, come here," I called softly, moving toward the dog. But as I got closer, my blood ran cold. The dog wasn't moving. It was dead, its body twisted in a way no living animal could be. Someone or something had positioned it to look like it was just resting, but at the wrong angle. Like whoever didn't quite understand how dogs lay down. I backed away, drawing my gun now. That's when I heard it, voices behind me calling my name. Carl Brennan?" A woman's voice, familiar, too familiar. I turned slowly, gun raised. No one at the campsite should know my first name, and no one in Yellowstone should sound exactly like my ex-wife, Linda. There she was, stepping out from between the trees. Linda, my ex-wife. She wore the same blue sweater she had on the last time I saw her, at the courthouse 3 years ago. "Carl?" I've been looking everywhere for you, she said, smiling. I kept my gun pointed at her. You're not Linda. Who are you? She tilted her head, just like Linda used to do when she was confused. Don't be silly. Of course I'm Linda. Remember that night in Lake Michigan, when we took that boat out and got caught in the storm? You said it was the most scared you'd ever been. My hand shook. I had never told anyone about that night. It was our secret. How could this person know? Linda is in Chicago. You're not her. I took a step back. That's when I noticed her eyes. They were completely black. No whites, no iris. Just black pools that reflected nothing, not even the sunlight. Daddy! Two small voices called out from behind. Linda. My heart nearly stopped. Emma and Lily came running out of the trees, my daughters, my little girls. But they were different. Now, taller, older. How they should look today. Not in the old photo I carried. Girls, I whispered. They ran toward me, but I raised my hand to stop them. Something was wrong with their smiles, too wide, stretching farther than any human. Mouth should, and their shadows. Their shadows fell in the wrong direction, away from the sun instead of toward it. Don't you want to hug your daughters, Carl? Another voice. My old partner, Mike. He stepped out from behind a tree. Then my father appeared. Two, my father who died when I was in police academy. They surrounded me in a half circle, perfect copies of the people I loved most, but all with those same black eyes, all with something slightly wrong about them. Fingers too long, skin too pale, movements too jerky. We've missed you, they said in unison. The false Linda stepped closer. I know why you left Chicago, Carl. I know about the money you took from evidence, about the witness you threatened. I shook my head. That never happened. But it did, said the thing pretending to be my father. You told me about it on your wedding day. Don't you remember? They were trying to confuse me, pulling false memories from somewhere. I kept my gun up, turning slowly to keep them all in view. They had formed a perfect circle around me now, moving with unnatural coordination. For just a second, the false Linda's image flickered. In her place stood something tall and thin, with limbs too long for its body, a gaunt, inhuman face with sunken eyes. Then Linda was back, smiling that wrong smile. We know everything about you, Carl, my fake daughters said together, their voices blending into one. We know about the nightmares, about how you can't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. I'd never told anyone about my nightly ritual of checking locks, not even Linda. The mic thing reached out to touch my shoulder. I jerked away, but not before feeling its hand, cold and somehow not quite solid, like touching gelatin. Come with us, Carl, they all said together. We have so much to show you. They knew my secrets, my memories, but they were getting things wrong too, mixing up details. Whatever these things were, they could read my mind somehow, but imperfectly. I realized with growing horror that I was facing something impossible, something that wore human faces like masks and reached into human minds for memories. And right now, it was reaching into mine. Stay back, I warned, my gun still raised. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. The fake Linda smiled at me. Carl, the girls miss you. Don't you want to be a family again? She gestured toward the thermal pools behind her. Steam rose from the bubbling water. Let's go for a walk by the hot springs, like we used to do at the lake. Linda and I had never visited any lakes together, except Lake Michigan. This thing was getting details wrong. That's when it hit me. These creatures fed on memories, my memories. They pulled them out of my head, but they weren't perfect at it. They mixed things up, created false ones, and every time they spoke about my past, I felt a strange emptiness in my mind, like they were taking pieces of me away. What happened to the Miller family? I demanded. All 5 of them. Linda, the girls, Mike, and my father tilted their heads at the exact same angle. Creepy. They're fine, fake Mike said. They just went for a swim. In the hot springs, I asked. Those waters are boiling. No one swims in them. The creatures looked confused for a moment, like they didn't understand. Then they all smiled again. Come closer, Carl, Fake Lily said. I want to tell you a secret. I took another step back and felt my foot splash in water. They were herding me toward a hot spring. I glanced back. The water bubbled at over 200 degrees, hot enough to cause third-degree burns in seconds. I looked at the water and noticed something strange. The creatures cast no reflections. Nothing, like they weren't even there. What are you? I whispered. The Linda thing frowned. I'm your wife, Carl. Don't you remember? We met at... She paused, searching my mind for the information. At the police academy. Wrong. I met Linda at a coffee shop. This thing was in my head, but it couldn't get everything right. Suddenly, I couldn't remember the names of my daughters. The creatures were stealing my memories, feeding on them. Emma, I said out loud, fighting to hold on to the name. Lily. The fake daughters hissed, their faces flickering between my girls and something inhuman. I had dealt with liars my whole career as a detective. I knew how to spot inconsistencies. These things were powerful but confused by contradictions. You're right, I said suddenly. We should go to our special place, the cabin by Crystal Lake where we spent every Christmas. There was no cabin, no Crystal Lake. I'd never taken my family to any cabin for Christmas. It was a fake memory, bait for the trap. The creatures looked excited. Yes, the cabin, Fake Linda exclaimed, with the red door and the fireplace. They were building on my lie, creating false details. I fed them more. Remember how we'd always have hot chocolate on the porch, even though it was freezing? Yes, they all nodded eagerly. The hot chocolate! I was confusing them with contradictory information. Their faces started to flicker more rapidly between human and something else, the skinwalker's true form. I backed up slowly, leading them away from the hot springs and toward a different one. The largest in the area, a boiling pool that rangers warned could kill in seconds. But first, I said, we need to get the special mugs we left at the campsite. The Christmas mugs! They all turned toward the campsite, momentarily distracted by this new false memory. In that split second, I made my move. I charged at the Linda thing, using an old police takedown move. My shoulder hit her midsection, and she felt wrong, too light, too cold. We both tumbled toward the largest hot spring. At the edge, I pushed, off with all my strength, rolling away while she fell in. The scream was like nothing I'd ever heard, a mix of Linda's voice with something ancient and inhuman. The creature thrashed in the boiling water, its form shifting rapidly between my ex-wife and a tall, skeletal thing with grey skin. The other four creatures rushed toward their falling friend, but in their confusion, they got too close to the edge. The bank gave way beneath them, crumbling into the hot spring. Their screams joined together, my daughter's voices, Mike's, my father's, and other voices I didn't recognize. The Millers, maybe. I crawled backward, watching as the things dissolved in the boiling water, their forms melting away into nothing. When it was over, the silence returned to the forest. But something was wrong with my head. I felt foggy, confused. I couldn't remember why I had come to this campsite. Something about a family. But what was their name? And my daughters? I knew I had twin girls, but their faces were blurry in my mind. Their names danced just out of reach. I staggered back to my truck, radio in hand. Dispatch? Incident at campsite? I need help. But I couldn't explain what had happened. Already, the details were fading. 3 days later, they found the Miller family's bodies in a ravine 1/2 mile from their campsite. The official report said animal attack. I knew better, but I couldn't explain why. I stayed on as a ranger at Yellowstone, but I was different, hollow. Part of me was gone, dissolved with those creatures in the hot spring. Most days I stare at the worn photo on my dashboard, trying to remember the names of the two little girls smiling back at me. Sometimes I think I hear them calling to me from the trees, but I never go looking. Some things should stay forgotten. My name is Daniel Murphy, and this story still gives me nightmares. Even after all these years, what happened in the Great Smoky Mountains back in 1962 changed me forever. I'm telling you this now as a warning. Some places in this world aren't meant for people to wander. It was a beautiful October morning, the kind that makes you glad to be alive. I remember how the early morning mist floated between the old oak and maple trees. Their leaves were painted in bright reds and golds, like nature's own fireworks frozen in time. The sound of Abrams Creek was like gentle music nearby. Birds called to each other from the branches above, wood thrushes with their sweet songs. I could hear squirrels scurrying around, busy collecting acorns for winter. I felt at peace for the first time in a long while. The mountain air was crisp and clean in my lungs. Golden sunlight poured through gaps in the trees, making spots of warmth on the forest floor. These were the moments that made being a park ranger the best job in the world. Then everything changed. The forest went silent. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. Even the crickets, who never stopped their chirping, went quiet mid-note. The hair on my arms stood up. In nature, sudden silence means only one thing: danger. I checked my watch. 6:47 a.m. Something strange caught my eye. The shadows around me seemed to be getting longer instead of shorter. That's impossible, I thought. Shadows shrink as morning goes on, not the other way around. I grabbed my radio to call it in. Nothing but static came back at me. The nearest ranger station was 23 miles away, through some of the roughest terrain in Tennessee. I was on my own out here. A red fox trotted across the path ahead of me. Nothing unusual about that, except for how it stopped and stared right at me. Those eyes looked too knowing, like it was trying to tell me something. Then it just went on its way as if nothing happened. The weather shifted without warning. Fog started creeping up from the valley below. Not the normal morning mist, but something thick as cotton and cold as winter breath. It wrapped around the tree trunks, hiding the ground from view. The trail split into 3 paths ahead. I stopped and pulled out my map, confused. I'd surveyed this exact area just last week. There should only be 1 trail here, not 3. None of these paths were on my map. I took a sip from my coffee thermos and nearly spit it out. The taste was wrong, bitter and metallic like pennies. It was fine just minutes ago. It felt like the very air around me had changed somehow. Rex, my German shepherd, pressed against my leg. His ears were flat against his head. Good boy, Rex, always by my side. Little did I know that this would be our last morning together. I should have turned back right then. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But something in these mountains had other plans for me. And I was about to discover just how unprepared I truly was for what waited deeper in those woods. I should tell you a bit about myself. My friends call me Dan, but most folks know me as Ranger Murphy. I'm 36 years old, though people often think I'm older. My hair started turning gray early, not from age, but from things I've seen. 12 years ago today, I was far from these peaceful mountains. I was a soldier freezing in Korea at a place called Chosun Reservoir. The cold there was different from any cold you can imagine. It didn't just chill you, it hunted you. I watched my friends, my whole squad, die in that ice and snow. Some nights, I still wake up shaking, feeling that cold in my bones. My hands have scars from frostbite, little reminders I carry with me. My eyes don't rest much either, always scanning, always watching, old habits from war that never quite leave you. My wife Jenny couldn't take it anymore. The nightmares, how I'd jump at small sounds, the way I always packed too many supplies for simple camping trips. Being prepared for anything isn't the same as living, Dan. she told me the day she left. That was 8 months ago. After the army, becoming a park ranger made sense. Out here in the Smokies, I know every plant, every animal track, every weather. In Patton, the mountains don't lie to you. They're dangerous sometimes, but at least they're honest about it. I touched the compass hanging from my neck. The only thing I have from Captain Lewis, my squad leader. He gave it to me before he died, told me to find my way home. I never go anywhere without it. Rex nudged my hand with his nose. 8 years old and still the best partner I could ask for. He's a rescue dog who became a rescuer himself. We've pulled 6 lost hikers out of these mountains together. He can follow a scent trail 3 days old through running water. Smart as any human I've ever met. If there's one thing the army taught me, it's never to leave a mystery unsolved. Unknown things get people killed. That's why I decided to check out the strange trails instead of heading back. That choice nearly cost me everything. I adjusted my rifle strap across my shoulder. The weight of my .30-06 was comforting. In my pack, I had my combat knife, first aid kit, emergency rations, matches, flashlights and water to last 3 days. Standard gear for any ranger patrol. Something deep in my gut told me I'd need every bit of my training before this day was over. That feeling you get when the air pressure drops before a big storm. It was like that, but worse. Rex whined softly. I rested my hand on his head to calm him, but the truth was, I needed the comfort more than he did. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, not believing my own words. "Let's figure out what's going on here." I chose the middle path and started walking. With each step, the forest seemed to close in around us. The trees watched, the silence listened, and somewhere ahead, something waited. We hadn't gone more than 100 yards when I heard it. A low whistling sound that drifted through the trees, not like wind, not like any bird I'd ever heard. It sounded like someone, or something, was blowing air through a hollow tube. Through bone. The sound made my skin crawl. Rex heard it too. He stopped dead in his tracks and began backing away from the trail. His ears were flat against his head and his tail tucked between his legs. I'd never seen him act like this before, not even during thunderstorms that usually scared him. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, but I knew he couldn't tell me. His eyes were wide with fear, the kind of deep animal fear that humans have mostly forgotten. That's when I saw it hanging from a branch about 12 feet up, a deer, a fresh kill, but hung in a way no mountain lion or bear would do. It was completely drained of blood, not a drop on the ground below. The cuts were clean, precise, almost surgical. No animal I knew could do that. I stepped closer to examine it and noticed markings carved into the tree bark. They weren't anything I recognized. Not Cherokee symbols, not trail markers, not anything human as far as I could tell. They looked like jagged teeth and twisted bones arranged in circles. I pulled out my compass to get my bearings, thinking maybe I should head back after all. The needle spun wildly, turning complete circles without stopping. It wouldn't point north. Something was interfering with it, something that shouldn't be possible. A smell hit me then. If you've ever come across an animal dead for days in summer heat, you know the smell of decay. This was like that, but mixed with something, sickly sweet like flowers rotting. It was so strong I had to cover my nose with my bandana. Just off the trail, something bright caught my eye. Red plastic poking out from under some leaves. I brushed them away and found a child's backpack. The tag inside had a name, Billy Thompson, and a date, 1961. I remembered the case. A 10-year-old boy who went missing on a family camping trip last year. They never found him, despite the biggest search effort I'd ever seen in these mountains. But here was his backpack, looking brand new. The colors were still bright. The fabric wasn't faded or damaged. It should have been falling apart after a year in the elements. Inside were a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a comic book, and a small toy car. all perfectly preserved. The sandwich wasn't even moldy. That's when I knew for certain something was very wrong here. I looked up and felt a chill run down my spine. The trees seemed to be leaning inward, creating a kind of tunnel ahead of us. I swear those trees had been standing straight just minutes ago. That feeling of being watched grew stronger. It wasn't just in my head anymore. I could feel eyes on me from every direction, like invisible insects crawling across my skin. Years of military training told me I was in someone's crosshairs, but I couldn't see the enemy. I checked my watch, 7:15 a.m., but when I looked at the sky between the branches, the light was all wrong. The sun looked like it was setting, not rising. Orange and red light filtered through the trees as if it were dusk, not morning. Rex growled, low in his throat, staring into the dense woods to our right. "What do you see, boy?" I asked, squinting to follow his gaze. The mist swirled and parted for just a moment. That's when I saw the first glimpse of what was hunting us. And God help me, I almost wished I hadn't. Between the trees stood a figure that shouldn't exist. It was tall, at least 9 feet, and thin as a skeleton. Its body was pale white like bleached bone. On its head sat what looked like a crown, made of animal skulls and antlers, all of them gleaming white in the strange dim light. But its face, God, its face, where a person would have skin and eyes, this thing had a deer skull. Not a mask. It was its actual head. The eye sockets were empty except for swirling darkness, like looking into tiny storm clouds. And the teeth inside, that skull mouth, weren't deer teeth. They were human. I stood frozen, my training forgotten. Rex was trembling against my leg. Then it spoke. "Murphy, why didn't you save us?" The voice hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't the creature's voice. It was Captain Lewis's voice, my dead squad leader. Perfect in every detail down to the slight southern accent. "You're not real," I whispered, my mouth dry as sand. The thing tilted its skull head, like it was curious. Then it took a step forward, moving in a way that wasn't quite right, like its legs had too many joints. That's when Rex broke free from his fear. With a snarl, he launched himself at the creature, trying to protect me like he'd been trained to do. My brave, loyal friend. The thing moved faster than anything should be able to move. One moment it was 20 feet away. The next it had Rex by the throat. I heard a quick snap. Then my dog, my partner of 8 years, hung limp in the creature's grasp. "No!" I screamed, raising my rifle. The creature dropped Rex's body and looked at me with those empty eye sockets. Suddenly, my vision blurred. I wasn't in the Smoky Mountains anymore. I was back in Korea, surrounded by ice and snow. My squad members lay frozen around me, but they were changing. Their limbs stretched, their faces pulled into deer skulls. They were becoming like the creature. "You left us to freeze, Murphy," said Private Jenkins, his face half human, half skull. "You could have saved us," whispered Sergeant Miller, his arms growing longer, fingers turning to bone. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. "This isn't real," I gasped. "You're not real." The voices shifted, morphing into my ex-wife's. "You never really came home from the war, Dan. You brought the cold back with you." Then my father's voice. "Always knew you'd fail when it mattered most, boy." Every person I'd ever lost, every voice that haunted my dreams, this thing knew them all and used them against me. The air around me turned freezing cold. I could see my breath coming in white clouds, though it was October in Tennessee. The temperature must have dropped 40 degrees in seconds. The creature, the Wendigo, I realized, remembering old stories from Native American rangers, moved through the trees like smoke. It would be there, then gone, then reappear closer to me. Once, it seemed to step right through a solid tree trunk. I fired my rifle. The bullet passed straight through it without effect, like shooting at fog. The Wendigo reached out and dragged its claws against an oak tree, leaving deep gouges in the wood. 8 inches deep in solid oak. It was marking its territory, and I was in it. I scrambled backward, trying to get away, only to find myself in a natural bowl of rock formations. Tall stone walls surrounded me on 3 sides. The only way out was past the creature. I was trapped. The hunter had herded me exactly where it wanted me. The Wendigo stood at the entrance to the rock bowl, its skull face fixed on me. It made that bone whistling sound again, the noise that had first drawn me down this path. Now I understood. It was calling me, like a hunter calls game. I had nowhere left to run. My mind raced, searching for anything that might save me. A memory flashed. Korea, huddled with the last survivors of my squad. Captain Lewis teaching us survival tricks. In the deep cold, he'd said, fire is life. Fire is your only friend. Fire, the opposite of ice and death. Maybe that's what I needed now. My hands shook as I reached into my pocket for my lighter. In my pack, I had a small emergency kit with a tiny bottle of camp stove fuel. Not much, but it might be enough. The Wendigo stepped closer, its bone crown scraping against the rock walls. The air grew colder with each step. Ice crystals formed on the ground around its feet. I grabbed a handful of dried leaves and twigs and dumped the fuel over them. The Wendigo was only 15 feet away now. I could smell its scent, like a butcher. Shop left to rot in summer heat. My thumb struck the lighter. Once, twice, no flame. The cold was affecting it. Come on, I whispered desperately. The Wendigo tilted its head again, almost curiously. It raised one long, bony hand, fingers ending, in claws like carved ivory. The third time, the lighter caught. A small flame danced in my palm. I touched it to the fuel-soaked leaves, and they burst into bright orange flames. The effect was immediate. The Wendigo recoiled, those empty eye sockets somehow showing fear. It let out a screech that shook the very air, a sound no living creature should make. The high-pitched wail hit me like a physical force, dropping me to my knees and making my ears ring painfully. Small branches fell from trees. Loose rocks tumbled down the walls around me. I crawled back to my feet, the fire between me and the creature. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope. It feared the flames. The captain's compass hung heavy around my neck. For 12 years, I'd carried it as a reminder of my guilt, of those I couldn't save. But maybe it was time to let go of the past if I wanted any chance at a future. With a silent apology to Captain Lewis, I pulled the compass from my neck and threw it into the flames. It was my tether to guilt and pain, and watching it burn felt like cutting free from an anchor. The Wendigo howled again and lunged forward, reaching past the fire. Its claws raked across my chest, tearing through my jacket and shirt. The wounds instantly felt cold, freezing cold, as if ice formed in my blood where it touched me. I stumbled, back clutching my chest. The pain was intense, but something else was happening too. The voices in my head, all those people blaming me, haunting me, they were fading. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts clearly. I wanted to live. It was that simple. Whatever guilt I carried, whatever nightmares haunted me, I wasn't ready to die in these mountains. I fired my rifle again, aiming for the Wendigo's chest. As before, the bullets passed straight through without effect. But each shot pushed it back toward the flames, which seemed to cause it real pain. Fire was my only weapon, but the small pile of leaves was already burning low. I made the hardest decision of my life. I poured the last of my fuel on my jacket. Sleeve. "You want me?" I shouted at the creature. "Then come get me." I lit my sleeve on fire. The pain was immediate and terrible, but I didn't have time to think about it. I charged forward with a yell that came from deep in my soul, tackling the Wendigo with my burning arm. We crashed into the larger fire I'd made. The creature's bone-chilling screech turned to something almost like a human scream. The flames caught on its dry skeletal form, racing up its body like it was made of paper. We rolled on the ground. Together, both of us burning now. The cold of its body fought against the heat of the flames. Ice formed and instantly melted over and over where our bodies touched. The Wendigo thrashed wildly, its strength inhuman. Claws tore at my skin, but I held on, keeping it in the fire. I could feel my consciousness slipping from the pain of my burns, but I refused to let go. For Rex, I whispered. For my squad. For me. The creature gave one final terrible shriek. Then it stopped moving. The bones began to blacken and crack in the heat. With the last of my strength, I pushed myself away from the fire and rolled on the ground to put out the flames on. My clothes, my left arm and side were badly burned. My chest wounds from its claws still felt frozen, but I was alive. I lay on my back, staring up at the sky. The strange darkness was lifting. Sunlight, normal morning sunlight, filtered through the trees. Again. It took me 3 days to crawl out of those mountains. My radio started working again, about a mile from where I'd faced the Wendigo. When they found me, I was half dead from my injuries. The doctors couldn't explain the mix of severe burns and frostbite on my body. They definitely couldn't explain why, in the middle of October in Tennessee, I had wounds frozen solid. I told them I got lost and had an accident with my camp stove. What else could I say? They never found Rex's body. They never found any trace of the Wendigo. But in that section of the Smoky Mountains, there's a circle about a mile wide where the temperature is always 10 degrees colder than the surrounding forest, where ice forms on summer mornings, where animals won't go. Sometimes at night I still hear that bone whistle in my dreams. And I wake up cold, no matter how many blankets I pile on. So if you're hiking in the Smokies and the forest goes quiet, all of a sudden, if you feel eyes watching you from between the trees, don't investigate. Don't be brave like I was. Run. Run while you still can, because the bone whistler is still out there, and it remembers the taste of those who escaped. My name is Diane Hawthorne. I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for just over 6 months now. What happened to me last autumn still haunts my dreams. It was early October, the kind of autumn morning where fog hangs so thick you could almost grab it with your hands. I remember how it wrapped around Cataract Falls like ghostly fingers as I made my way up the trail before dawn. The trees were showing off their fall colors, bright red maples and golden oaks as far as you could see. The Appalachian Trail stretched ahead of me, winding through the mountains that connect Tennessee and North Carolina. It was beautiful, but something felt off. I kept sweeping my flashlight back and forth, cutting through the mist. It was so thick I could almost taste it, earthy and damp on my tongue. The beam only reached a few feet ahead before getting swallowed up by the fog. In the distance, I heard thunder rumble. Strange, because when I looked up through gaps in the trees, I could see stars sparkling in a clear sky. No storm clouds anywhere. The waterfall made it hard to hear anything else. Cataract Falls isn't the biggest in the park, but when you're close, that rushing water drowns out everything. I strained my ears, trying to catch any unusual sounds. My radio crackled with static, making me jump. I tried adjusting it, but the interference was bad. Probably that weather front moving in, I muttered to myself, trying to stay calm. From somewhere below in the valley, an owl called out, that low, haunting sound that always sends shivers down my spine. The sound bounced between the ancient hollows, making it impossible to tell where it came from. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the familiar mountain smells. Wet leaves breaking down into soil, the sweet scent of mountain laurel and pine needles crushed underfoot. These smells usually calmed me, but not tonight. The moon was bright enough to filter through, the trees creating weird, shifting patterns on the ground. I watched as the shadows seemed to move on their own, like they were alive. Just tricks of the light, I told myself. But the strangest thing was the heat. It was October in the mountains. It should have been cold, I'd worn my heavy jacket expecting a chill, but sweat was already running down my back. The ground itself felt warm, like something underneath was giving off heat. I checked my watch. 5:17 a.m., still dark, still quiet. Too quiet, actually. I suddenly realized I couldn't hear any crickets or frogs. No rustling of small animals in the underbrush, just the waterfall, the distant thunder, and my own breathing. I didn't know it then, but I was walking straight into the hunting grounds of something that shouldn't exist, something that collected bones, and in a few hours it would be hunting me. I pulled my auburn hair tighter into its ponytail. When I get nervous, I tug at my hair, an old habit I've never shaken. My dad used to tease me about it when I was little. "Diane," he'd say, "you'll go bald before you're 30 if you keep that up." I miss him every day. I touched the ranger badge pinned to my jacket. It was Dad's before he passed. I keep it polished so shiny I can see my reflection in it. He'd be proud to know I followed in his footsteps, even if I took a roundabout way. To get here, 6 months ago I was still working as an EMT in Knoxville. The city job paid better, but after what happened, I needed a change. Needed the quiet of these mountains to help me forget, but I can't forget, not really. His name was Ethan, just 8 years old with a gap-toothed smile and dinosaur stickers on his backpack. He fell from a hiking trail not far from here, tumbled down 30 feet into a ravine. By the time I got to him, he was struggling to breathe, internal bleeding stealing the color from his face. I can still feel his small hand gripping mine. Still hear his voice, so small and scared, "Don't let me die." But I did. I couldn't save him. I tried everything I knew, everything I'd been trained to do, but his injuries were too severe. He died before the helicopter could reach us. For weeks after, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. That's when I decided to leave emergency medicine and transfer to the Park Service. I thought being surrounded by nature might heal something broken inside me. My fingers found the small silver cross hanging around my neck. Grandma gave it to me when I graduated from EMT training. "To protect you," she'd said. I'm not as religious as she was, but I never take it off. Maybe I need the protection more than I want to admit. I took a deep breath and kept walking. I'm good at what I do. Before Ethan, I'd saved dozens of lives with my careful step-by-step approach to wilderness medicine. That's why they called me in tonight, despite it being my day off. Missing campers, my supervisor had said over the phone, and reports of strange screams that don't sound human, Diane. We need someone with medical training to check it out, just in case. I'd packed extra medical supplies in my backpack. Emergency trauma kit, splints, field sutures, burn treatments, even a snake bite kit. Always prepared for the worst. That's my motto. The trail narrowed as I climbed higher, heading toward the campsite where the hikers were last seen. 2 college students on a weekend trip who hadn't checked in with their families. Probably just lost cell service, I told myself. Probably just sleeping in, unaware of the worry they'd caused. But as the sky began to lighten from black to deep blue, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The forest felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I pulled out my map and checked my location. 1/2 mile to go until I reached their campsite. Just ahead, the trail would fork, left toward Craggy Dome, right toward Silver Creek. The students had planned to camp at the creek. As I tucked the map away, I heard it. A sound that made my skin prickle with goosebumps. A scream, not quite human, not quite animal, something in between. It came from up ahead, beyond the next ridge. I swallowed hard and forced my feet to keep moving forward. The weight of my backpack suddenly felt heavier, and I found myself walking faster, drawn toward a sound I should have been running from. "Hello!" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the forest. "Park Ranger, is anyone there?" No answer, just the fading echo of my own words. I clicked my radio, hoping for backup, but only got static in return. Whatever waited ahead, I would face it alone. The campsite came into view just as the first hint of sunrise painted the sky pink. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. The tent was destroyed, not just knocked over or damaged, but shredded, like someone had taken giant scissors to it. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I could see deep claw marks in the fabric. Whatever had done this had torn through the heavy-duty nylon like it was tissue paper. The claw marks were huge, 6 inches deep at least. "Hello, this is Ranger Hawthorne. Is anyone here?" I called out, hoping against hope that the campers had somehow escaped. No answer. I knelt down to examine the torn tent better, and that's when I saw them. Bones. Human bones scattered around the campsite like someone had thrown them carelessly across the ground. My first thought was the missing campers, but something wasn't right. These bones looked old, yellowed and bleached white in places, like they'd been exposed to the sun for years, maybe decades. They couldn't belong to the college students who'd just gone missing yesterday. I picked up what looked like a piece of femur, a thigh bone. It was smooth, worn by time and the elements. As I turned it over in my hand, I noticed strange markings on it, like someone had carved tiny symbols into the surface. I placed it carefully back on the ground and looked around the clearing. The trees surrounding the campsite had similar markings carved into their trunks, not with a knife, but with something else, something that left jagged, uneven cuts in the bark. The symbols matched the ones on the bone. Something was very, very wrong here. I realized I couldn't hear any normal forest sounds. No birds singing their morning songs, no squirrels chattering, no insects buzzing. The entire ecosystem seemed to have vanished overnight, leaving behind an unnatural silence that pressed against my ears. I took a few steps away from the tent and nearly gagged. A horrible smell rose from the ground where the soil was disturbed, like rotten eggs mixed with something dead and decaying. The earth there looked scorched, as if something incredibly hot had rested on it. My flashlight flickered and dimmed in my hand. I shook it, confused. I'd put in fresh batteries that very morning before leaving home. It shouldn't be failing already. I clicked it off to save what power remained and relied on the growing daylight instead. The ground was soft from yesterday's rain, and clear footprints were visible all around the campsite. Some were obviously human, the college students, I assumed, but others were something else. They were huge, at least twice the size of my boot. They walked on 2 legs like a person, but the footprints showed long, clawed toes digging deep into the mud. Whatever made these wasn't human. As I studied the tracks, a wave of heat hit me like opening an oven door, so intense I had to take off my jacket. Then just as suddenly, the temperature plummeted. I could see my breath clouding in front of my face. My fingers went numb with cold, and I hurried to put my jacket back on. These wild temperature swings made no sense. It was like the laws of nature were breaking down around me. I decided to follow the strange tracks, hoping they might lead me to the missing campers. The footprints headed east, away from the main trail and deeper into the wilderness. I radioed in my position and findings, but got only static in response. I was truly on my own. As I walked, a sound stopped me in my tracks. Heavy breathing, not mine. It came from somewhere behind me in the trees. I froze, not daring to turn around. The breathing was deep and ragged, like something large was struggling for air, and it seemed to match my pace. When I stopped, it stopped too. I slowly reached for the bear spray attached to my belt. We had black bears in these mountains, but they rarely approached humans. This didn't sound like a bear, though. It sounded different, wrong somehow. The breathing got louder, closer. Whatever it was moving toward me. I finally found the courage to turn around, my hand gripping the bear spray so tight my knuckles turned white. What I saw through the trees made my blood turn to ice. A massive shadow moved between the trees. At first I thought it was just the morning light playing tricks on my eyes, but then it stepped forward, and I saw it clearly. It was huge, at least 8 feet tall, standing on 2 legs like a person. But that's where any resemblance to a human ended. Its body was covered in dark, coarse fur that hung in matted clumps. Dark stains covered the fur, dried blood, I realized with horror. I stood frozen, unable to move as it took another step toward me. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel it watching me, studying me. "Hello?" I managed to stammer, my ranger training kicking in despite my fear. Maybe it was just a bear standing on its hind legs. Maybe my scared mind was making it look bigger and more threatening than it really was. Then it raised its hands, and I saw the claws. Long, razor-sharp, and moving in a way that didn't seem natural, extending and pulling back in like a cat's, but much larger and more deliberate, like it was showing them to me on purpose. The early morning light caught something else, something white protruding from its body, bones, actual bones sticking out from its fur, from its shoulders and back and arms. Not its own bones. These looked like they had been pushed into its flesh from the outside, like trophies it was carrying in the most horrible way possible. It took another step toward me, and its eyes caught the light. 2 yellow orbs glowed like flames, reflecting my flashlight beam back at me when I nervously flicked it on. The light revealed more of its face. A twisted snout, teeth too large for its jaw, and those burning eyes that never blinked. I fumbled for my radio again, desperate for help. "Emergency! This is Ranger Hawthorne at Silver Creek campsite. I need immediate..." Before I could finish, something impossible happened. The bones sticking from the creature's body began to move. They rose into the air around it, floating like they were suspended on invisible strings. The creature made a noise, a deep, rumbling growl that somehow formed shapes in my mind, almost like words I couldn't quite understand. The floating bones began to spin, faster and faster, until they were just white blurs circling the monster. I dropped the radio and ran. Behind me I heard a whistling sound, and a sharp pain exploded in my left shoulder. One of the bones had struck me, piercing my jacket and grazing my skin. I kept running, zigzagging between trees, trying to make myself a harder target. Another bone spear flew past my head, missing by inches and embedding itself in a tree trunk. With a solid thunk, it had thrown it with incredible force. The bone was buried several inches deep in the wood. I glanced back and immediately wished I hadn't. The creature was chasing me, running on 2 legs with unnatural speed, and worse, where I'd seen a deep cut on its arm from a branch it had crashed through, the wound was closing before my eyes. The flesh was knitting back together, healing in seconds. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, my lungs burning and legs aching. The forest blurred around me as I focused only on escape. The creature stayed right behind me, its breathing now a bone-rattling growl that formed those almost words. Again, it was trying to communicate, but all I could feel was the malice behind the sounds. I broke through the trees into a small clearing and nearly fell. The ground dropped away suddenly. I'd reached the edge of a limestone cliff. Below me, I could see the dark mouth of a cave in the rock face. I turned to find another escape route, but the creature was already there, blocking my path back to the forest. It raised its clawed hands, and more bones rose from the ground around its feet, sharpening themselves against rocks as they floated. Upward, I was trapped. The monster took a step forward, driving me closer to the cliff edge. I could feel loose rocks giving way beneath my boots. Another step back would send me falling. With nowhere left to run, I raised my bear spray and aimed it at the creature's face. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice stronger than I felt inside. The creature tilted its head, almost curiously. Then it did something I'll never forget. It stepped forward and straight through a large boulder that stood between us. It passed through the solid rock like it was nothing but smoke, emerging on the other side, still coming toward me. I sprayed the bear spray directly into its face. The creature roared in pain, stumbling backward. The sound was so loud it shook the ground beneath my feet. The floating bones clattered to the earth as its concentration broke. I took my chance. Instead of running back the way I'd come, I scrambled down the cliff face, half climbing, half sliding, toward the cave opening below. It was dangerous, but it was my only option. Above me, the creature's roars turned to that growling speech again. I looked up to see it peering over the cliff edge, those yellow eyes following my every move. Then it disappeared. I knew it was coming for me. I knew it could move through rock. And I knew I had to find a way to escape before it found me again. The cave mouth loomed before me, dark and unknown, but my only hope. As I ducked inside, I heard a sound from deep within the cave system. It wasn't the creature. It was human. Someone was calling for help. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called into the darkness of the cave, my voice echoing off the damp walls. "Diane? Diane? Is that you?" The voice was familiar. It was Mike Torres, another ranger and my friend. What was he doing here? I fumbled for my flashlight, praying it would work. The beam flickered but held steady enough to light my way deeper into the cave. After about 20 feet, I found Mike. He was sitting against the wall, his face pale with pain. His leg was bent at a wrong angle, clearly broken. "Mike, what happened? How did you get here?" "Got your radio call about the missing campers." He winced. "Just bits and pieces through the static. Came to help. Then I saw that thing. It chased me here. Diane, what is it?" I didn't have an answer for him. "We need to get out of here," I said instead. "It can move through rock. This cave isn't safe." Mike nodded, his eyes wide with fear. "I think I know where we can go. Cataract Falls. The noise from the water might mask our movements." It was a good plan. Better than staying in the cave anyway. I helped Mike to his feet, letting him lean on me. His weight made progress slow, but we managed to move through the twisting cave passages. Thankfully, this cave system was well known to the park rangers. It eventually led out to a spot not far from the falls. As we emerged from the cave into daylight, I heard it, the clatter of bones against rock. The creature had found us again. "Move!" I hissed to Mike. "Toward the falls, now!" We hobbled as fast as we could through the forest. The sound of rushing water grew louder with each painful step. Behind us, branches snapped and those almost words growled through the trees. We reached Cataract Falls just as the creature burst from the tree line. The falls thundered down beside us, sending up a constant spray that made the rocks slippery and dangerous. But the noise would help hide us if we could just find somewhere to hide. "Over there," Mike pointed to a narrow ledge that ran behind. The waterfall. We might be able to slip behind it. I helped Mike toward the ledge, but another bone spear whistled through the air, striking the rock wall inches from his head. We turned to see the creature approaching, this time with a new horror. All around it, bones rose from the ground, old bones that had been buried in the soil for who knows how long. They floated into the air and began to assemble themselves. A skull, a spine, ribs, arms, legs. In minutes, a complete human skeleton stood beside the monster, moving like a puppet on invisible strings. "Oh God," Mike whispered. The animated skeleton lurched toward us, while the creature hung back, those yellow eyes watching, controlling its bone puppet from a distance. I helped Mike onto a higher rock, then faced the skeleton. My EMT training suddenly flashed through my mind. I knew the human body, knew its weak points and pressure points. Maybe that knowledge could help me now. As the skeleton lunged for me, I dodged and struck at its elbow joint, knocking the bones apart. They clattered to the ground, but immediately began reassembling. "The falls!" I shouted to Mike over the roar of water. "We need to get behind them." We inched our way onto the narrow ledge that ran behind the waterfall. The rocks were slippery, the footing treacherous. One wrong step would send us plummeting onto the jagged rocks below. The skeleton followed us, its bone fingers grasping at our clothes. Behind it, the creature approached, those floating bone spears circling around it like deadly satellites. Mike lost his footing on the wet rock and slipped, crying out in pain. As his broken leg scraped against stone, he grabbed onto a root protruding from the cliff face, barely stopping his fall. The skeleton reached for him. I kicked at it, sending bones scattering, but they kept coming back together, reforming and advancing again. I remembered my emergency flare gun. It was meant for signaling rescuers, but right now it was the only weapon I had. I pulled it from my pack and aimed it at the approaching creature. The flare shot out with a hiss, a bright red streak through the air. It struck the monster directly in its fur-covered chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the matted fur began to smoke. The creature howled as flames erupted across its body, spreading quickly through its dirty, dried, blood-covered goat. The animated skeleton collapsed instantly, its bones clattering across the rocks as the creature's concentration broke. The monster stumbled backward, frantically trying to put out the flames that engulfed it. "Mike, we need to move now," I shouted, reaching for him. But as I turned, I saw the horror on his face. The burning creature had sent one last bone spear, flying. It struck Mike directly in the chest. His eyes went wide with shock. "Diane," he whispered. Then he lost his grip on the root and fell. "Mike!" I screamed, lunging for him, but it was too late. He tumbled down onto the rocks below, the bone spear still embedded in his chest. I knew immediately he was gone. The burning creature, blind with pain, staggered and fell too, plunging over the edge of the waterfall and disappearing into the churning pool below. The flames sizzled out with a hiss as it hit the water. I clung to the cliff face, shaking with grief and shock. Somehow I managed to make my way back to solid ground. I collapsed beside Mike's body, tears streaming down my face. I'd failed. Again, just like with Ethan. I couldn't save him. Hours later, the rescue team found me still sitting there. I told them about a wild animal attack, about Mike slipping and falling while we tried to escape. I never mentioned the creature or the floating bones. Who would believe me? They found no trace of the monster, no giant footprints, no bones sticking out of trees. Nothing but a destroyed campsite and 2 dead hikers whose bodies were recovered a mile downstream. I quit the ranger service a month later. The nightmares were too much. The sounds of bones rattling. Yellow eyes watching me from the darkness. Mike's face as he fell. Sometimes I think about going back, about hunting for that thing to make sure it's really gone, to make sure no one else will die the way Mike did. But I can't bring myself to return to those mountains. All I know is that somewhere in the great Smoky Mountains, in the caves and hollows where sunlight never reaches, something ancient and hungry waits, something that collects bones. And if you're hiking there and hear thunder when there are no clouds in the sky or feel a strange heat rising from the ground beneath your feet, run, just run, and don't look back. My name is William Henderson, though most folks just call me Bill. I've been a ranger here in Superior National Forest for nearly 7 years now. It's a quiet life, and that's exactly what I wanted after coming back from Korea. The snow started falling early this year. By December, we already had 2 feet of the stuff blanketing everything in sight, pure white as far as the eye could see, the kind of white that hurts your eyes if you stare at it too long. I was out on patrol that night, my snowshoes crunching through the fresh powder. Each step made that satisfying crunch sound, like biting into a crisp apple. The air was so cold it burned my lungs with every breath. Each exhale created a little cloud that hung in front of my face before disappearing. Looking up, I could see the northern lights dancing across the sky, green and gold ribbons twisting above the treetops. Some nights they're barely visible, but tonight they put on quite a show against all those stars. Out here, away from city lights, you can see more stars than you'd believe existed. The lakes between the islands of forest were frozen solid, stretching out like giant mirrors. In the moonlight, they almost seemed to glow, beautiful but deadly if you didn't respect them. Something felt off, though. My compass was acting strange, the needle spinning around like it couldn't make up its mind. That's not normal, not even with the aurora overhead. In all my years out here, I'd never seen interference this bad. From somewhere in the darkness, a snowy owl called out. It sounded almost human, like someone trying to imitate an owl, but not quite getting it right. I stopped and listened, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up despite my heavy winter gear. Then I caught a whiff of wood smoke. Campfire. But that didn't make sense. There shouldn't be anyone camping out here, not with the weather reports calling for a major blizzard. Besides, I couldn't see any fire or light through the trees. As I continued walking, the sound of ice-covered streams tinkled like little bells in the wind. Normally, that sound was peaceful. Tonight, it felt like a warning. My stomach growled, loud enough that I actually stopped and put a hand on my belly. That was weird. I'd eaten a solid meal just an hour ago before heading out. No way I should be this hungry already. But the emptiness in my gut felt almost painful, like I hadn't eaten in days. I checked my watch. It was nearly midnight. Somewhere out in this frozen wilderness was Jake Erickson, an old trapper who'd been working these woods since before I was born. He'd missed his weekly radio check-in 3 days in a row now. With the blizzard bearing down on us, this was my last chance to find him before we'd all be snowed in for at least a week. I adjusted my pack and pushed forward. The hunger in my stomach grew stronger with each step, and the wind seemed to whisper words I couldn't quite make out. Something was very wrong in these woods tonight. I could feel it in my bones, the ones that still ached from those long months in the prison camp. And I was heading straight toward it. The cold always brings back memories, bad ones. I flexed my left hand inside my thick glove, feeling the empty spaces where my pinky and ring finger used to be. Frostbite took them during my 2nd month. As a prisoner in North Korea, the doctor said I was lucky to keep the rest of my hand. Lucky. That's what everyone called me when I made it home after 18 months in that camp. Lucky Bill Henderson, one of the few who survived. They didn't know what survival had cost. I pulled out my flashlight and swept the beam across the snow, looking for any sign of Jake's tracks. The wind was picking up, erasing footprints almost as fast as they could be made. I didn't have much time. As I walked, my mind drifted back to the camp. The cold there was different, a damp cold that seeped into your bones and never left. We slept huddled together for warmth, too tired and hungry to care about anything but staying alive until morning. Food was what we thought about most. What we'd eat when we got home. The meals our mothers made. By the end, we were catching rats and insects. Some men ate bark off trees. Others ate things I try not to remember. I touched the small metal cross hanging around my neck. I'd made it from a piece of wire I found in the camp. It wasn't about religion, not really. It was a promise to myself, to live differently than I had in that place. That's why I took this. Job in the middle of nowhere. People in town don't ask questions. They see my missing fingers, the way I sometimes stare at nothing, and they leave me alone. Out here in the forest I can almost forget. Almost. The wind suddenly died down, leaving an unnatural silence. I stopped walking and just listened. No owl calls now, no rustling branches, nothing. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Henderson, you copy?" "Over." It was Martinez back at the ranger station. I pressed the talk button. "Copy. Any word on Jake?" "Over." "Negative, but that storm's moving faster than predicted. You've got maybe 2 hours before it hits your area. After that, you're on your own until it passes." "Over." I looked up at the sky. The stars were gone, now covered by thick clouds. The aurora was still visible at the edges, giving the clouds an eerie green glow. "Copy that. I'm about half a mile from his cabin now. I'll check it out and head back." "Over." "Be careful out there. Something doesn't feel right. Martinez out." He was right. Something definitely didn't feel right. The hunger in my stomach had gotten worse, a gnawing emptiness that reminded me too much of the camp. My survival training kicked in, telling me to stay focused on the mission, find Jake, then get us both to safety before the storm hit. I'd been out in bad weather before. I knew all the tricks to stay alive. I always carried extra supplies, matches in waterproof containers, emergency flares. I'd saved 3 lost hikers last year during the worst snowstorm in a decade. This was my job. I was good at it, but as I looked ahead through the trees and saw a faint light that had to be Jake's cabin, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. The strange hunger twisted inside me again. My mouth watered even though there was nothing to eat. I suddenly remembered the faces of the men who didn't make it out of that camp alive, how their eyes had sunk into their skulls as their bodies ate themselves from the inside out. I shook my head to clear it. Focus, Bill. Just find Jake. I trudged forward, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead of me. The light from the cabin wasn't moving like a normal lamp or fire. It flickered strangely, almost pulsing. As I got closer, I could make out the shape of the small log cabin. The door was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. Jake would never leave his door open in this weather. I reached for the pistol on my hip, a habit from my military days. Suddenly, I was very glad I still carried it. I approached Jake's cabin slowly, my boots crunching in the snow. Something wasn't right. The door wasn't just open. It looked like it had been clawed from the inside. Long, deep scratches marked the wood, splinters hanging where something had tried to force its way out. "Jake?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast silence. "It's Bill Henderson. You in there?" No answer. I drew my pistol and held my flashlight in my other hand, the beam shaking slightly. The cross around my neck felt cold against my skin. The wind picked up again as I reached the doorway, almost as if it was trying to push me inside. I took a deep breath and stepped over the threshold. The smell hit me first, like rotten meat and something metallic, blood. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the cabin's interior. I've seen some terrible things in my life, but what was inside that cabin made my blood run cold. Bones, scattered across the floor. Some still had bits of meat on them, and mixed in with them were teeth, human teeth. They were everywhere, like someone had pulled them out one by one and tossed them aside. "Oh God, Jake," I whispered, "what happened to you?" My light moved to the walls, and I nearly dropped the flashlight. Bloody handprints covered every surface, not just random smears, but deliberate patterns, like someone trying to claw their way out. Or maybe trying to write something. I forced myself to step further inside, fighting the urge to run. The cabin was freezing, colder than outside, which didn't make any sense. My breath came out in thick clouds. The temperature had to be well below 0 in here. I noticed something else strange. My flashlight beam seemed to bend and twist in the corners of the room, like the light itself was trying to get away from something. Then I saw the markings, carved into the wooden walls with what looked like fingernails, strange symbols I'd never seen before, deep enough that whoever made them must have torn their fingers to the bone. I pulled out my radio. "Martinez, you..." "There. Over. Nothing but static. Martinez, this is Henderson. I'm at Jake's cabin. Something's wrong. Over." More static, then a voice that might have been Martinez, but the words were lost in the interference. I put the radio away. I was on my own. The wind outside suddenly picked up, howling around the cabin, but it didn't sound like normal wind. It sounded like voices, like people calling for help. One voice rose above the others. It sounded exactly like Jake. "Bill, help me! I'm out here! Please!" I froze. That was Jake's voice, no doubt about it. But it couldn't be him. Not with what I was seeing in this cabin. Heavy footsteps circled outside, crunching in the snow. I moved to the window, wiping away frost with my glove. I couldn't see anything but swirling snow in my flashlight beam. "Bill, please! I'm hurt!" Jake's voice called again, closer now. I backed away from the window. Whatever was out there, it wasn't Jake. The footsteps stopped right outside. The door. Something was standing there just beyond the threshold. I could feel it waiting, watching. I looked around the cabin for anything I could use as a weapon besides my pistol. Jake always kept a rifle, but I couldn't see it anywhere. The hunger in my stomach suddenly twisted so violently I doubled over. It felt like my insides were trying to eat themselves. I hadn't felt pain like this since the camp, when we'd gone 5 days without food. "What's happening?" I gasped, clutching my stomach. Then I noticed something. There were no animal tracks anywhere near the cabin. No bird droppings. No signs of mice or squirrels. In all my years as a ranger, I'd never seen a place in these woods completely devoid of wildlife. Everything had fled. The footsteps started again, moving away from the door. I forced myself to the window, peering out into the blizzard that was now in full force. That's when I saw it, a tall, thin figure moving through the snow. It had to be at least 12 feet tall, with arms and legs too long for its body. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, like it wasn't used to its own limbs. As it turned toward the cabin, the hunger inside me grew so intense, I fell to my knees. Whatever was out there in the storm was coming back, and somehow I knew it was hungry too. I dragged myself to my feet, fighting against the pain in my stomach. My mouth was watering uncontrollably now, like I hadn't eaten in weeks. My hands trembled as I checked my pistol. 6 bullets. Not much, but better than nothing. The wind died suddenly, leaving an eerie silence. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside the window. I could see my own reflection in the glass. My face looked gaunt, cheeks hollow, eyes sunken. I touched my face. I didn't look like that this morning. Then something moved behind me in the reflection. I spun around, pistol raised, but the cabin was empty. Just bones and blood and those strange carvings on the walls. "Show yourself." My voice cracked, betraying my fear. The temperature dropped even further. Frost began forming on the inside of the windows, spreading like fingers across the glass. I could see ice crystals forming in the air around me. Then the door swung open. It filled the doorway completely. 12 feet tall at least, it had to stoop to look inside. Its body was impossibly thin, like someone who had starved to death but somehow kept going. I could see every bone under its pale, stretched skin. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in long fingers tipped with yellowed claws. Its legs were bent backward at the knee, like a deer's, but too long, too wrong. But it was the face that made my heart stop. Human, but not human. The skin was pulled so tight over the skull that it looked like it might tear. Yellow teeth filled a mouth that was far too wide, with cracked lips drawn back in a permanent grimace of hunger. And the eyes, God, the eyes. They burned with an orange-red light, like fire seen through smoke. They never blinked, just stared with a terrible intelligence. It was looking right at me. "What are you?" I whispered. The creature's mouth opened, wider than should be possible. When it spoke, its voice was Jake's, perfectly copied. "Bill, why didn't you come sooner? I was so hungry." Then it changed, becoming a chorus of voices, men, women, children, all crying out in hunger and pain. I raised my pistol and fired twice. The bullets hit it square in the chest, but the creature didn't even flinch. Small puffs of frost appeared where the bullets entered, but no blood came out. It took a step into the cabin. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out as solid ice crystals that tinkled as they hit the floor. The hunger inside me grew so intense I nearly doubled over again. I felt like I was being eaten from the inside out. I backed away until I hit the wall. "Stay back!" The creature tilted its head, studying me. When it moved, it was so fast I could barely see it. One moment it was in the doorway, the next it was across the room, looming over me. Up close, I could smell its breath, like the grave and winter nights. A localized blizzard seemed to swirl around it, snow and ice forming in the air wherever it went. It reached for me with those long, terrible fingers. I ducked and rolled away, feeling the air freeze where I had been standing. My left hand brushed against its leg as I moved, and instantly pain shot up my arm. 2 of my remaining fingers had turned white with instant frostbite. I scrambled to the other side of the cabin, putting Jake's small table between us. My mind raced, trying to understand what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But I knew what it was. Every ranger in these parts had heard the old stories, the native legends. I'd always thought they were just tales to scare children away from the deep woods. Wendigo, I whispered. The creature's head snapped toward me when I said the word, its burning eyes narrowing. It seemed to grow even taller, the top of its head scraping against the cabin ceiling. "You were human once," I said, remembering the stories. "Someone who ate human flesh to survive. That's the curse, isn't it?" The Wendigo made a sound, half laugh, half moan, that sent ice down my spine. It pointed one long finger at me, then at itself, then back at me. It was telling me something, that we were the same, and in that moment I understood. The prison camp, the things I'd done to survive, the hunger that never truly went away. "No," I said, backing away. "I'm not like you." The Wendigo smiled wider, its mouth stretching impossibly. It spoke again, but this time in a voice I hadn't heard in 7 years. The voice of a fellow prisoner who hadn't made it out alive. "We all make choices when we're hungry, Bill." My blood ran cold. How could it know that name? How could it know what happened in that camp? The hunger in my stomach was unbearable now. I felt my own body beginning to consume itself from the inside. I realized with horror that this was the Wendigo's power. It brought starvation with it, making its victims feel the same hunger that had created it. It was playing with me, enjoying my fear and pain. I needed a plan, and fast. The blizzard outside was getting worse. I could hear the wind picking up again, rattling the cabin walls. Soon, there would be no escape. The Wendigo took another step toward me, frost spreading across the floor from its feet. Its claws reached for me, promising the cold embrace of death. I needed to find a weakness. Every creature had one. What did the old stories say about killing a Wendigo? Fire. The word popped into my head suddenly. The old stories said Wendigos feared fire. It was the only thing that could hurt them, the last remaining piece of their humanity. I glanced at the wood stove in the corner of Jake's cabin. It was cold now, but there was a stack of firewood beside it. If I could just reach it. This Wendigo sensed my thoughts. It moved with that terrible speed again, placing itself between me and the stove. Its burning eyes seemed to mock me. "You're not leaving this cabin, Bill," it said in Jake's voice, just like I didn't. I needed a distraction. My eyes darted around the room, looking for anything I could use. On the shelf above me was a bottle of Jake's moonshine, strong stuff he made himself. It was mostly alcohol. In one quick motion, I grabbed the bottle and threw it, as hard as I could, at the Wendigo's face. The glass shattered against its skull, liquid splashing across its pale skin. The creature screeched, a high, inhuman sound that made my ears ring. It clawed at its face, momentarily blinded. I made a dash for the stove, grabbing logs and kindling. My fingers, even the frostbitten ones, moved automatically. Starting fires was second nature after years in these woods. Behind me, the Wendigo recovered. I could feel the temperature dropping again as it stalked toward me. My hands shook as I struck a match. The kindling caught just as a clawed hand grabbed my shoulder. The cold was so intense I screamed in pain. I spun around, shoving the burning kindling directly into the Wendigo's chest. The effect was immediate. Flames spread across its body like it was made of paper. The creature shrieked and backed away, its movements frantic now. The fire cast strange shadows across the cabin walls, making the bloody handprint seem to move. The Wendigo's burning eyes fixed on me with pure hatred. It lunged forward, ignoring the flames eating away at its body. I dodged, but not fast enough. Its claws caught my side, tearing through my jacket and the skin beneath. The cold of its touch was worse than the pain of the wound itself, like being stabbed with icicles. I fell to the floor, clutching my side. Blood seeped between my fingers, freezing almost instantly in the unnatural cold. The Wendigo loomed over me, still burning but not seeming to care. It reached down with those terrible hands. With my last bit of strength, I grabbed a burning log from the now roaring stove and thrust it upward, straight into the creature's open mouth. The effect was catastrophic. The Wendigo's whole head erupted in flames. It staggered backward, clawing at its burning face. The sound it made wasn't human or animal. It was like ice cracking and mountains falling. It crashed into the cabin wall, wood splintering under the impact. For a moment it stood there, a burning scarecrow of impossible proportions. And then it turned and fled into the blizzard outside, leaving a trail of fire and frost in its wake. I lay on the floor, shivering uncontrollably. The cabin was warming now with the stove lit, but I felt cold inside, like the Wendigo's touch had frozen something deep within me. I managed to get to my radio. "Martinez, anyone. I need help. Jake's cabin. I'm hurt." Through the static came Martinez's voice. "Bill, what happened? The storm's too bad for rescue until morning." "I know," I said, looking at the blood freezing on my hands. "Just come when you can." I turned up the stove as high as it would go and wrapped myself in Jake's old blankets. The hunger in my stomach had faded to a dull ache. I hoped that meant the Wendigo was far away now. I must have passed out, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows and Martinez was shaking me awake. "Jesus, Bill, what happened here?" I looked around the cabin in the daylight. The bones were still there, the blood, the strange carvings. But now it all looked almost normal, like a crime scene, not something supernatural. "Animal attack," I said. "Got Jake. Came after me." Martinez looked skeptical but didn't argue. "Let's get you to a hospital." They patched me up pretty. Good. The wounds weren't as bad as they looked, the doctor said. I'd be back to work in a few weeks. But something wasn't right. The hunger came back, worse than before. I'd eat until I couldn't move, then be starving again an hour later. I started dreaming about the Wendigo every night. In my dreams, it was always burning, always watching me with those fiery eyes, always hungry. Sometimes I woke up with frost on my sheets, even with the heater running. I lost weight, a lot of weight. People in town started talking. I caught them staring at me in the general store, whispering behind my back. I knew what was happening, but I couldn't stop it. The Wendigo's curse. I'd been marked. By the time winter came around again, I could barely get out of bed. The hunger was all-consuming. I thought about food constantly, but nothing satisfied it. The night of the first big snow, I looked in the mirror and saw someone else looking back. Someone with hollow cheeks and burning eyes. Someone hungry. I locked myself in my cabin that night, threw the key out into the snow. I wrote this all down so people would know what happened, would understand. They found me in the spring, what was left of me. They say I ate my own fingers first, then my hands. They say it's the worst case of insanity they'd ever seen. But it wasn't insanity. It was the hunger that walks. And it's still out there, in the deep woods of the Boundary Waters, waiting for someone else who's done the unthinkable to survive. Someone else who knows what it means to be truly hungry. Because that's how it spreads. That's how it continues. The curse of the Wendigo. So if you're ever up in the Superior National Forest in winter and you feel a hunger that doesn't make sense, if you hear voices calling your name in the storm, if you see a tall figure moving through the trees, run, just run and pray it isn't already too late. My name is Catherine Foster, but everyone calls me Cat. This morning started like any other January patrol through Manistee National Forest. God, I wish it had stayed that way. The forest was a winter wonderland, the kind you see on postcards. Fresh powder snow covered everything. The ground, the towering pines, every single branch perfectly outlined in white. The sky was so blue and clear it almost hurt to look at it. Days like this made me remember why I left Detroit for this job. I love the silence up here. The only sounds were the soft whisper of wind through the evergreens and the occasional distant crack of ice forming on the hidden streams. My snowshoes made that satisfying crunch with each step. It's the kind of quiet that lets you think, that makes you feel small but somehow connected to everything around you. I'd been following my usual patrol route for about 3 hours. Nothing special. Checking for downed trees across trails, making sure no hikers had gotten themselves lost, keeping an eye out for wildlife in distress. Normal ranger stuff. I even stopped to eat my sandwich by that little clearing where the deer usually gather. Everything felt right. Then I saw them, tracks in the snow. Big tracks, way too big. At first, I thought maybe a large wolf had passed through, but these were massive, easily 8 inches long. The depth of the prints showed whatever made them was heavy, much heavier than any wolf I'd ever encountered. And the claw marks, they extended almost 4 inches beyond the paw. Prints. No normal animal makes tracks like that. I checked my watch, 3:45 p.m. Sunset would be at 4:30, and I noticed dark clouds building on the northern horizon. A storm was coming in. Great timing. I tried calling it in on my two-way radio, but all I got was static. The ice storm last. We had damaged our repeater tower, and repairs weren't scheduled until next Tuesday. I was on my own out here. That's when the deer family burst from the tree line about 50 yards ahead of me. 5 of them running full speed, leaping through the deep snow with their eyes wide. They weren't just moving, they were fleeing from something. The lead buck actually ran within 10 feet of me, not even registering my presence. That's when my neck started to prickle. Wild animals don't ignore humans unless they're running from something worse. The temperature seemed to drop suddenly. I'd started my day at a bearable 20 degrees, but now my thermometer read close to 0, and the wind was picking up, creating a dangerous wind chill. My breath came out in thick white clouds that hung in the air too long. I was about 8 miles. From the ranger station, and the trail back would take me across 3 frozen streams. With these temperatures dropping, I couldn't be sure the ice would hold under pressure. But something told me I couldn't stay here either. The air felt wrong somehow. Too thin, too cold, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I've spent enough time in these woods to know when something isn't right. It felt like winter itself was watching me, waiting to see what I'd do next. I should have turned back right then. I should have headed straight for the station, radioed for backup once I got in range. That's protocol. But 20 years in law, enforcement teaches you things. Sometimes bad things, like how curiosity can get you killed, and how sometimes you need to know what's out there before you can outrun it. So I did the stupid thing. I followed the tracks. I guess you should know a bit about me to understand why I made such a dumb choice that day. My name's Catherine Foster, but I've been Cat since I was a kid. I'm 31 years old, and before I became a forest ranger, I was a police officer in Detroit. For 8 years, I didn't leave the force because I wanted to. I left because I had to. 3 years ago, my partner Mike and I responded to a drug raid. It was supposed to be routine. We'd done dozens just like it. But this one went bad, really bad. Mike didn't make it out, I did. And every day since then, I've wondered why it wasn't me instead. After that, the city felt like it was choking me. Every siren, every slammed door, every shout on the street made me jump. The doctors called it PTSD. I called it failing. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. I was always looking over my shoulder, always ready for the next bad thing to happen. That's no way to live. So I left, applied to the Forest Service, moved up north and traded concrete for pine trees. I thought the quiet would heal me. Sometimes it does. The hardest part wasn't leaving the job, though. It was leaving my boys, James and Thomas, my twin 6-year-olds. The divorce happened right after I left the force. Todd, my ex, got custody because I was unstable. Hard to argue when you wake up screaming 3 nights a week. Now I see my boys every other weekend. Tomorrow was supposed to be our weekend together. I'd planned their first real camping trip, nothing too wild, just an overnight at one of the family sites near the lake. I'd been teaching them about stars and trees and animal tracks. They were so excited. I touched the friendship bracelet on my wrist, blue and green yarn woven together by tiny fingers. "So you don't forget us when you're with the trees, Mommy," Thomas had said when they gave it to me, as if I could ever forget them. My police training kept me alive in Detroit, and it's kept me alive out here too. 3 years of wilderness training. Added to that, I know how to track animals, how to read the forest, how to survive if things go wrong. I'm good at my job, but that cop instinct never really goes away. That need to investigate, to understand the danger instead of just running from it. In the city, knowledge was power. Out here, it might get you killed. I checked my gear as I followed those strange tracks deeper into the forest. My .357 revolver sat heavy on my hip. Rangers aren't usually armed, but my background got me special permission. I had 3 emergency flares, my survival knife, and winter camping gear rated for temperatures down to 20 degrees. Basic stuff, but enough to keep me alive if I got stuck overnight. With each step following those massive paw prints, I asked myself what I would tell my boys if I gave up now. "Always be brave, but never be stupid," I always told them. Was I being brave or stupid? Maybe both. The wind picked up, throwing ice crystals against my face. The tracks led deeper into a part of the forest I didn't patrol often. A valley between 2 rocky ridges where the old-growth pines grew so thick they blocked out most of the light. As the shadows lengthened and the day grew darker, I heard my son James's voice in my head. "Did you see any monsters in the forest today, Mommy?" I always told him no. Today I wasn't so sure. The tracks led me into a clearing I'd never seen before. Here, the footprints were clearer, pressed deep into the frozen ground where the wind had blown away some of the snow. 8 inches long, with claw marks extending 4 inches beyond, way too big for a wolf or even a bear. My stomach tightened as I crouched down to examine them. That's when I noticed the blood. Small, bright red droplets scattered across the white snow, leading from the tracks toward the center of the clearing. Something had been killed here, something big. I followed the blood trail carefully, my hand resting on my gun. The trail ended at a large patch of disturbed snow. Whatever had died here had been dragged away. The long scrape marks in the snow told that story clearly enough. "Just a deer," I whispered to myself. "Probably just a deer." But as I moved around the clearing, I saw the trees. Several of the large pines had been clawed and scarred about 9 feet up from the ground. 9 feet. Bears might stand that tall on their hind legs, but bears don't leave claw marks like these. Long, deliberate slashes that tore deep into the wood, and caught in the bark were tufts of coarse black fur. I pulled one free and rolled it between my fingers. It wasn't bear fur. It wasn't wolf fur. I'd never felt anything like it, thick and almost bristly, like wire. That's when I realized how quiet it had gotten. Too quiet. Michigan forests in winter are never completely silent. There should be squirrels chattering, chickadees calling, the soft flutter of snow buntings, but there was nothing, as if everything living had fled the area. I pulled out my compass to get my bearings. The needle spun wildly, never settling on north. My GPS unit, which had been working fine all morning, now displayed nothing but error messages. Even my flashlight flickered despite the fresh batteries I'd put in just yesterday. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. In my 8 years as a cop and 3 as a ranger, I'd learned to trust that feeling. Something was very wrong here. A scent hit me then, a strong musk mixed with something like wet dog, but underneath was another smell, something almost like human sweat, but wrong, somehow, sour, angry. I followed my nose to the edge of the clearing and stopped dead in my tracks. There, half hidden among the trees, was a structure, not a natural formation. This had been built. Massive broken trees had been stacked and woven together with stones wedged between them to create a crude shelter. It was too large for a bear den, too organized to be something created by the wind or snow. My first thought was that maybe some survivalist types had built it, but no human could have lifted some of those logs. We're talking trees 2 feet thick, snapped like twigs and piled 15 feet high. Around the base of this shelter were bones, lots of bones. Most were clearly from deer and rabbits. I recognized the delicate leg bones and skulls. But some were larger. Some looked disturbingly human-like. I told myself they were probably deer bones too. The mind plays tricks when you're scared. And I was definitely scared now. Steam rose from the dark entrance to the shelter, billowing out in the cold air. Something large and warm was inside, breathing heavily. I could hear it, a low, rumbling sound that wasn't quite a growl and wasn't quite breathing. That's when a horrible realization hit me. The tracks I'd been following hadn't been random. They'd been deliberately laid out, a path that led me exactly here. I wasn't tracking something. Something had been leading me. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. The snow had started falling again, fat, heavy flakes that limited visibility to about 30 feet. The daylight was fading fast. As I turned to leave, I saw fresh tracks in the snow behind me, tracks that hadn't been there when I entered the clearing. Whatever made them had circled around while I was investigating. It was between me and the way back to the ranger station. I was being hunted. I froze in place, barely breathing. The snow fell heavier now, swirling around me in the growing darkness. I squinted through the white curtain, scanning the trees for movement. That's when I saw it. Through the falling snow, about 40 feet away, a massive figure emerged from behind a thick pine. At first, my brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. It stood upright on 2 legs, easily 8 feet tall, its body covered in thick black fur. But it was the head that made my blood turn to ice, wolf-like, with a long snout and pointed ears, yet attached to shoulders that were unmistakably human-shaped. Its eyes caught what little light remained. 2 yellow discs that reflected, like mirrors fixed directly on me. I didn't move. I couldn't. 20 years of training abandoned me in that moment. The creature tilted its head, studying me. Its hands, if you could call them that, ended in claws that had to be 6 inches long, the same claws that had left those deep gouges in the trees. What happened next chilled me more than the bitter cold. The thing reached out toward my backpack, which I'd set down while examining the shelter. It didn't touch it, but it made a gesture like it understood what the backpack was for, like it recognized human tools. This wasn't an animal. Animals don't understand equipment. I slowly reached for my gun, trying not to make any sudden movements. Then I heard it, a sound that made my heart nearly stop. "Mommy! Mommy! Help me!" It was a child's voice. It sounded exactly like my Thomas when he's scared. But Thomas was miles away, safe with his father. This thing, this creature, was mimicking a child's cry. I knew then I was dealing with something impossible, something that shouldn't exist. A howl broke the silence, coming from somewhere to my right. Then another answered from behind me, and a third from my left. There were more of them, and they had me surrounded. "It's not real," I whispered to myself. "This isn't happening." But it was. The creature in front of me suddenly vanished from sight, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. I spun around, trying to track it, only to spot it 20 yards away behind a different tree, a distance it couldn't possibly have covered in that split second. "Catherine," my ex-husband's voice now calling my name from the darkness. Then my children, "Mommy, where are you? We're scared, Mommy." I knew it wasn't real, knew it was some kind of trick, but my heart raced anyway. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to run toward those voices, even as my brain warned me it was a trap. The main creature I began thinking of it as the Alpha, rose fully on its hind legs, now towering at what had to be nearly 9 feet. It threw back its head and made a sound that was half howl, half scream. The others answered, and I realized they were coordinating, positioning themselves around me. The storm intensified, snow and wind whipping around me with unnatural force. It seemed impossible that the weather could change so drastically, so quickly, as if the creature somehow controlled it. I backed up slowly, trying to find higher ground or some kind of defensive position. Instead, I found myself moving into a natural depression in the forest floor, a bowl-shaped area surrounded by steep embankments on 3 sides. Too late. I realized I'd been herded here. This was a killing ground. I could see them now, 3 of them, including the Alpha. One to my right, partially hidden behind a fallen log. Another perched on the embankment above me. And the Alpha, still in front, slowly advancing. Their movements were synchronized, practiced. They'd done this before. I pulled my revolver and checked the cylinder. 6 shots. 6 shots against 3 supernatural predators. Not great odds. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice thin in the howling wind. The creatures paused, as if surprised I could speak. Or maybe they understood me. I couldn't tell which possibility was more terrifying. The one on my right crouched lower, muscles tensing under its thick fur. It was preparing to spring. Time slowed down. I remembered my boys' faces. I thought about the camping trip we'd planned. I touched the friendship bracelet on my wrist. "Not today," I whispered. I spotted a large boulder to my left, about 4 feet high. If I could get on top of it, I'd have higher ground and could limit their attack angles. I'd have a fighting chance. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on my gun, and prepared to make my move. The creature on my right lunged. I dove for the boulder as the creature sprang. Its claws missed my back by inches. I scrambled up the rock face, my fingers numb with cold but gripping desperately. From the top, I spun around, gun raised. The 3 creatures circled below me. Now, I could see them clearly in the fading light. Massive dog-like heads on powerful human-shaped bodies covered in thick black fur. Their yellow eyes tracked my every move. 6 bullets, 3 monsters, I whispered to myself. Better make them. "Count!" The Alpha moved first, charging straight at my position. I aimed and fired. The sound was deafening in the quiet forest. The bullet caught it in the shoulder, and the impact knocked it back a step. But it only staggered briefly before resuming its approach, black liquid oozing from the wound. Normal. Animals would flee after being shot. These weren't normal animals. I needed a new plan. Quickly, I reached for the emergency flares in my pack. My hands shook as I struck the first one against the igniter. It burst to life with a hiss, casting an eerie red glow over the snow. The creatures backed away from the sudden light and heat. Their reaction gave me an idea. "You don't like fire, huh?" I muttered. I threw the flare toward the creature on my right. It jumped back, snarling. I immediately lit a second flare and threw it in the opposite direction, creating a barrier of light on 2 sides. The Alpha howled in what sounded like frustration. The 3 began coordinating again, with one circling behind my boulder, while the others kept me distracted from the front. I couldn't let them surround me. Thinking fast, I pulled out my spare thermal shirt from my pack, along with the small bottle of emergency fuel I carried for my portable stove. I soaked the fabric and stuffed it into my empty water bottle, a makeshift Molotov cocktail. "Come on," I whispered, my breath visible in the freezing air. I lit the fabric with my third and last flare, then hurled the bottle at the creature. Trying to circle behind me, it exploded in a burst of flames, catching the beast's fur. It howled in pain and rage, rolling in the snow to extinguish itself. The Alpha snarled, changing tactics. It backed up, then charged full speed at my boulder. The impact shook the stone beneath my feet. Again it charged, and I felt the boulder shift. One more hit, and my safe spot would topple over. I fired again, hitting the Alpha in the leg this time. It howled but didn't slow down. 4 bullets left. The third creature had disappeared from view. I scanned frantically, finally spotting it climbing the embankment behind me. It was trying to get above me, to jump down onto my position. I fired at it, but the shot went wide. 3 bullets left. The Alpha rammed my boulder again. This time, I nearly lost my footing. My next shot hit it square in the chest, but still it kept coming. 2 bullets left. I was running out of options. The flares were burning out, their protective light fading. The creature I'd hit with the Molotov was back on its feet, its fur singed, but its yellow eyes full of hatred. My hand went to my wrist, to my son's friendship bracelet. What would I tell my boys if I gave up now? I made my choice. I pulled the bracelet off, soaked it in the last of my fuel, and lit it with the dying embers of a flare. The colorful yarn burned bright, a beacon in the darkness. "I'm sorry, boys," I whispered. "Mommy needs this more than I do right now." I tossed the burning bracelet onto a pile of dry pine needles beneath a low-hanging branch. The fire caught, quickly spreading up the tree and creating a wall of flames between me and 2 of the creatures. The third one, the one on the embankment, leaped down toward me. I pulled my flare gun from my pack, a last resort signaling device, and fired directly at its face as it descended. The flare struck it between the eyes, igniting its head in a burst of red fire. It fell to the ground, thrashing and howling, until it finally lay still. 1 down, 2 to go. And they were angrier than ever. The fire was spreading faster than I'd expected, driven by the wind. I was creating a forest fire, but I had no choice. It was that or die here. The Alpha charged. Through the flames, its fur smoking, but its yellow eyes fixed on me with terrible intelligence. I fired my last 2 bullets. 1 missed, the other hit it in the neck, but still it kept coming. I was out of bullets, out of flares, out of tricks. Then I noticed the snow cornice, a heavy overhang of snow at the top of the embankment, built up by the wind. If I could bring it down, I pulled my knife, my last weapon, and threw it with all my strength at the base of the cornice. It struck home, but nothing happened. The Alpha was almost on me now. I could smell its hot breath, see the gleam of its fangs. In desperation, I grabbed a burning branch from the spreading fire and hurled it at the snow cornice. The heat and impact did what my knife couldn't. With a low rumble that quickly grew to a roar, the snow began to slide. Avalanche! I dove flat against the boulder as tons of snow cascaded down the embankment, burying everything in its path. The creatures, the fire, and finally me. The world went white, then black.